start off with approval of the agenda with the replacement page. Motion to approve that. Councillor Gartner, seconded by Councillor Gilliland. Jason, could you just explain the replacement page before we vote on that?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair, the only change to the replacement page is the heading relating to Sport Aurora and the context of their business case request for funding. We just clarified the description of that request.
Okay, thank you. Does everyone understand that? We're good? Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Gardner. Jason, if I download the online version that's already been updated?
Yes, it has.
Thank you.
Okay, so everyone good with that? All those in favor, approval of the agenda with the replacement page? Opposed? That carries. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Public consultation, open session, opportunity for members of the public to provide input regarding the 2019 budget. Terry? No? You're good? Matthew? You good? Okay. All right, so we'll move on to number 5, consideration of items. First on the list is Planning and Development Services. Lawrence, you're up. Yeah, 5 minutes. I'm joking, don't worry. Go ahead.
Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor, CEO, and members of council. Thank you. I'm honored to be here tonight to present Planning and Development Services operational budget. In this presentation, I'll be going over the department functions, 2018 successes, challenges in the future, key pressures, and the objectives in 2019. So there are 4 divisions within Planning and Development Services department. I'm going to speak about development planning first. Development planning is responsible for undertaking reviews and provide recommendation on all Planning Act application. Examples I've listed here is preparation of the official plan, zoning bylaw amendments, as well as we prepare conditions of approvals and development agreements as part of draft plan of subdivisions or condominiums. We have a development engineer within the development planning team that oversees the engineering matters. We also would implement provincial and regional policy, including the environmental protection and enhancement of other policies. Of course, the Committee of Adjustment is also under the Development Planning Wing and Heritage Matters, which plays an active role in the identification and conservation of significant heritage properties, hosting events and programs such as Doors Open. So the Policy and Planning and Economic Development Division responsible for update and maintain the town's official plans, staff makes interpretations and review of all relevant regional and provincial planning policies, policy related to growth, management, and projections. And on the Economic Development Division side, staff makes updates to and maintenance of the economic strategy, including the town's strategic plan. So that would also involve in property sales, and all corporate GIS data analytics functions are conducted by our GIS in-house staff. Within the building divisions, we ensure that the compliance of the Ontario Building Code and standards in the town's bylaw, zoning bylaw for construction, demolition, renovations, and buildings through the administration and enforcement. And in the Engineering Capital Delivery Division, are responsible for delivering capital projects related to roads and infrastructures, site inspections and assumptions for new subdivision and asset management of our infrastructures. We can also conduct traffic and transportation analytics and review corporate energy and environmental initiatives. So the following are some departments' 2018 successes. So we had a record number of Doors Open visitors in 2018, over 3,000 people. We initiated the Traffic and Transportation Master Plan that will help support the growth of the town to 2041. We also conducted a town-wide creek study to help prepare a long-term program for flood damage and reduction in Aurora. We issued 936 building permits in 2018, and we anticipate more or less the same, if not higher. Making headway with the Library Square redevelopment project in 2018, along with the groundbreaking on a second hotel in town. This would be the Holiday Inn Express along the 404 at the end of Eric T. Smith Way. We've also completed the inspection of over 30% of properties under the sewage maintenance inspection program. And of course, everybody knows about the Niagara College Partnership and Armory renovations. And we have had about 6 development agreements executed in 2018 alone, with a total of 384 residential units. Now, some of our higher level challenges we anticipate that we'll work through them are traffic and parking in town. As the population increases, we have considered new mobility challenges and rising in parking demands. We need to update the environmental initiatives and incorporate recommendations of the energy and audit studies to develop climate change adaptation plan. As the population growth, the development pressures for more infill development will naturally occur. The town will need to balance that with the existing residential developments. We need to continue to promote downtown revitalization in the Aurora Promenade, manage servicing allocations, and attract new businesses to the town's employment lands. We will also be looking into implementing site alteration bylaw, which will be a combination of the topsoil removal bylaw and the fill bylaw. And of course, the new growth plans will pose a lot of new challenges for planners across GTA. And as technology changes, so should the town to accommodate better service. The building division will also look into implementation of a electronic plan examination software. So some of the largest pressure we anticipate in 2019 is the decrease in the anticipated engineering fees of $145,000. As larger subdivision becomes smaller, the amount will slowly decrease. But however, this will be partly offset by the line item just below that and through the site plan application. And majority of the application in 2019 will come in the form of condominiums and site plans. As historically, the division has been relying more on development charges, but we're moving towards slowly away from development charges going into 2019. And of course, most department salary impacts through COLA, step increase, and other approved staff actions. So despite the challenges and key pressures, staff is optimistic in 2019 to complete the following. We will continue to seek opportunities for more affordable housing, having in-house GIS staff to continue their innovations to engage community with respect to Planning Act applications. We'll initiate and update the town's official plan, develop a corporate strategic plan, and we're excited about the opening of the Canadian Food and Wine Institute in the Aurora Armory. And we'll update the corporate energy plans, management plans, and initiate the community energy plan once provincial funding is made available. We'll also complete the townwide creek management and Tannery Creek flood study. We will complete a townwide traffic and transportation plan, implement any dormant permit file programs, and promote a paper building permit submission, and as well as other engineering matters such as storm sewer outlet cleanup, road resurfacing works. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence. Any comments or questions for Lawrence? Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your report, Mr. Cook. Could you clarify whether or not in your 2019 objectives within respect to planning, and I guess maybe with engineering as well, the low impact development plan that we would possibly entertain in respect to the climate change that you had specified and the challenges moving forward?
Mr. Cook? Anka?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Aside from implementing low-impact development controls in capital project, development engineering is looking at applications, development applications that will have low-impact development included in the design. We part of the transfer of review program for stormwater management ECA, Environmental Compliance approval. Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority will make sure that any new development application that can implement low impact development will implement it at the site plan and at the subdivision level.
Councillor Gilliland?
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. Lawrence, I didn't catch it on, doesn't have a page number. Under challenges, align environment with energy conservation and climate change, and I think you mentioned some policies. Is that yours as well?
Anka.
Thanks.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it belongs to Engineering Division. Yes. Any recommendation from the studies that we are preparing now, corporate energy management plan. We updated this study and we have to be ready by July 1st, 2019 and post the study on the web. This is the deadline from the province. So we are going to implement all the recommendations that will create a strategy to have energy conservation measures for town services and buildings as soon as possible, as soon as we complete this corporate energy management plan. Also, we found out last week that Ministry of Environment approved the funding for the community energy plan. And we are working with, to confirm also that the funding from FCM is available. So we will start probably late spring or early summer, we will start to develop the community energy plan once this funding is confirmed with both agencies. But so far it looks promising. It's confirmed with MOE and also with FCM. It was confirmed last year. Our finance department is confirming again that it's our start date of beginning of July. It's going to be okay with the funding.
Councillor Gardner.
That's very good news. Thank you. To Lawrence, you mentioned under challenges, traffic and parking, and you mentioned the word mobility. Could you speak to that, please? Oh, is that you too?
Yes.
Anka.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So we are referring at, we look at the master transportation plan and the recommendation of the master transportation plan with a horizon of to 2041, and we look at complete streets. So traffic demand management, sidewalk gaps, and everything that will create, that will facilitate traffic and transportation in Aurora, given the fact that the town is growing and there are challenges with parking and mobility.
Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. I mean, that's very good to hear. I was thinking of mobility with respect to seniors' mobility. Be included? Okay.
Mobility too.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Gardner. That's good. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Through the key performance measures within our binder on page 9-8. So the first one speaks to the number of hectares of serviced vacant employment lands within the municipality. 2017, the target was 150. The actual was 75. 2018, we adjusted the target, I guess, to go down to 126, but for some reason, our forecasted number 73 is less than the previous year, so I'm not sure if there was a reduction in the number of hectares of service vacant employment lands, but then we've brought the target back up to 140, so I'm not sure if Lawrence or Anka can speak to, I guess, why the targets are so high, why we have missed them the last couple of years, and why we think we're going to hit that target in 2019.
Lawrence. Anka.
I think they're conferring.
Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. It's my understanding that in 2019, we will be seeing a higher increase in numbers because due to newer employment land subdivision that's more recently been approved. When we did this analysis, there is a new business park was approved at the northeast corner of Leslie and St. John Side Road. And as well as, of course, and there are other employment lands along St. John's Side on the 404 there. That's also designated as business park.
So, and correct me if I'm reading this wrong, but we expect the number of hectares of serviced vacant employment lands to double year over year. If our forecast is 73, we expect 140 next year?
Lawrence?
Yes, that's how I read this, this chart here.
Okay, well, I look forward to seeing if we hit the target eventually.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Any other comments, questions? Yeah, yeah, ask all your questions. Yeah. Did you hit your button yet? Did you hit your button yet? Well, I need you to hit your button. Thank you. Oh, see, now you waited so long that Councillor Kim's going to go before you. So, Councillor Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Cook, regarding the staffing request for an additional inspector, or Ms. Mahale, given the transition to infill developments, can you tell me? I'm sure you guys have already considered this before putting forth in the budget for a new hire, but can you speak to, hiring an inspector at this point in our development curve, given that we're moving more towards infill development?
Anka?
For you, Mr. Mayor, this site inspector's position is a temporary position for 3 years to relieve the stress that we feel now when we start assuming subdivisions in the 2C development area. To prepare a subdivision for assumption, there are a lot of inspections involved and a lot of closed caption TV that needs to be reviewed and commented on in case there are deficiencies with the underground infrastructure. So this position was put as a temporary position to relieve the pressure now when we, for the next 2 to 3 years, when we will start assuming into C area. And at the same time, depending on the workload, it might help with capital project delivery. After 3 years, that position will probably disappear depending on the workload that we will have in 3 years from now. But it's a temporary position, it's not a permanent position.
Councillor Kim?
So it says contract admin, so it's going to be a 3-year contract?
It's going to be a 3-year contract, yes.
Okay, and this is specifically to allay the bottleneck in the 2C?
Correct.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kim. Councillor Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On 9.9, the bottom measure, percentage of large building permits reviewed within the legislative time framework, it says that in 2018, we're going to meet the forecast, but then under comments, it said, well, it implies that we haven't and that the building industry understands.
Lawrence? Mr. CL?
Sure, through you, Mr. Mayor. The forecast is that what they're saying there, I believe, is that only 80% are meeting the timeframes that are required. And so we're actually 20% behind. Like we should be aiming for 100%, but due to the volume,
Okay.
that's why we're below, and the industry is understanding of that volume.
Councillor Gardner?
Thank you. So we knew we wouldn't be able to do 100%, so we set it for 80. We achieved that, but it's still below. Thank you so much. Under that, the last bit on this page, under notes, 2017 forecast figure is in lieu of actual because the final figures aren't available yet. Do you know when they will be available?
Lawrence?
We should have these numbers available in, I guess, soon. When we prepared this this budget, no, we couldn't tally up all the numbers here. So
You think we should have them soon, and then you'll give them to us?
yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Gardner?
I'm okay, thanks.
Thank you. Council, anything else? Get someone to move motion on the screen. Receive and tentatively approve. Councillor Gilliland, Councillor Kim. Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Next up, corporate revenues and expenses. Jason. Oh, he was.
Okay, corporate revenues and expenses. Corporate revenues and expenses predominantly consist of all the bits and pieces that don't fit well within a specific other department, such as grant funding, the flow-through of grant funding, particularly for big provincial and federal grants, retiree benefits, investment income, overhead cost recoveries from self-regulated programs such as the buildings and water programs, the overall contingency account for council's contingency account, audit fees are some examples that fall in that under corporate accounts and revenues. Some of the challenges that we're facing in this particular area relate to investment income. And as our traditional longer-term cash holdings are depleted, that puts pressure on our ability to raise the same type of investment income we traditionally have been able to raise. So that's certainly been a challenge that a growing challenge we've had to manage. Future grant funding, of course, is not guaranteed, so we can plan on grant funding to come in, but there's no guarantee that it'll come. So for example, our Ontario community infrastructure funding, we're expecting a nice, healthy program to increase for 2019. We've recently heard that likely won't be coming, for example, as one illustration. We have a town strategy to continue to reduce the town's reliance upon revenue from reserves to balance the budget. Other challenges include the difficulty in predicting the timing of required tax assessment adjustments and tax fine revenues. That particular line item falls under that area as well. Some of the key pressures that are being faced in corporate revenues and expenses relate to ones you're familiar with: the cash to capital increases that we plan every year, rate stabilization draw and net adjustment. So that's the second phase of our right sizing that we did in 2018 being phased onto the tax levy. That's the second phase of it. The release of the excess labor legislation monies that we initially had budgeted for in 2018. The overhead chargebacks to water and building service were slightly adjusted. As I mentioned previously to you, we undertook a review of both our water overhead and building overhead recoveries, the framework behind that to ensure it remained current and reasonable. And that resulted in some tweaks to those overhead recoveries that we do there. Post-retirement health and dental benefits continue to rise as more post-retirement folks go on the bill. Increased penalties from unpaid property taxes moved the other direction for us, and our payment in lieu of taxes increased slightly with inflation, as well as we recover that from our crown property owners. And there's a series of other minor variances that we're managing there. And that's it for the presentation.
Thank you, Jason. Council, any comments or questions? Councillor Gardner?
Thank you. Perhaps I'm not remembering this correctly, but when we were talking about needing to raise the minimum wage or raise the wages of some of our staff, I thought Mr. Nadarozny said, Mr. Nadarozny, I said it right the first time. I thought that you said that we found the money in the budget and it wasn't part of the tax levy. Am I wrong about that?
Mr. CEO?
Through Mr. Mayor, this item that is referred to in this budget is the impact of Bill 61.
Right.
The increase in revenue, the increase in the minimum wage, as well as some of the other rules. was supposed to be a 2-year phase-in.
Okay.
So we suggested a 2-year phase-in of the whole amount, even though it was not exactly 50% each year because of the way the legislation was proposed. Then what happened was, with the Ford government, they repealed some of the aspects of Bill 61, including the
Yeah.
anticipated increase on January 1 of $1, and there was a couple of other areas that they changed as well. And so what you see there is the net that comes back into the budget as a result of not having to implement those legislation changes. So I'm not sure if that answers the question about the salaries, because that's where the salaries were adjusted to compensate for that minimum wage. The other salary adjustment that actually did occur, part of it we managed on our own, the other part we couldn't, is that the legislation didn't allow for different rates of pay for basically part-time versus full-time people. And
Right.
so we had a number of positions, particularly in facilities area and some in recreation, that we had that problem. In the facilities area, we were able to mitigate it by changing job descriptions and actually having full-time people do different things than the part-time people. So in other words, part-time people wouldn't go as far. So we were allowed to mostly manage that wage difference, or that wage, bringing the two wages together. But that wasn't the case on the recreation side. A pool supervisor is a pool supervisor, and so we were forced to raise some of those rates. So that's all in the net. What you see there is the changes that we were forced to make, as well as the adjustment for the stuff that didn't come through the legislation.
Councillor Gardner?
Good explanation. So it was actually a budget item last year. We actually budgeted for the wage increases.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we did.
Okay. Thank you. Then that's explained. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Gardner. Jason, a few years back, we expanded our investment policy to include opportunities through I think it's called the One Investment Fund. And so just looking at the 2019 revenues, the table on page 11-6. So it says in 2017, our actual investment income was 1.5. And then we budgeted for 1.6 in 2018. You're projecting that we're going to be bang on, which is pretty good projections, given that it's an investment one. So I assuming you're just plugging that number in, but do you actually think we're going to be right on to the dollar?
Mr. Gardner?
Yes, we do. Because essentially what we do is we try to maximize investment income we can generate from our investment portfolio, and and if we make enough, we ensure we fully fund that $1.6 million budget, and the remainder goes towards replenishing our reserves. So up to this point, we've been able to generate sufficient investment income to at least fund that 1.6 million, which the operating budget is reliant upon, and the remainder goes towards our repair and replacement reserves, predominantly.
Councillor Thompson?
And so, off the top of your head, what is that as a percentage?
Mr. Gardner?
The yield?
The 1.6 million
Yeah.
percentage of the tax levy,
No, in terms of the
or rate
money
of,
that
rate of
investment-
return that we.
Yeah, what's the yield or whatever?
Oh,
2%? 3%?
it's probably not ballpark. We're working on our traditional year-end investment year-end report. It's coming. It's scheduled for middle of April. I think it's the second cycle of April. So I'll give you a more precise rate of return or yield. We have we generally have a yield, a better high yield we can make in our longer-term investments versus our short-term investments. And the challenges we allude to is our longer-term monies is the part that's being depleted now. So it influences our ability to generate those higher returns and higher holdings of investments.
Well, I look forward to seeing that report, it's considering we also have some big conversations around funding some long-term projects, and so it's good to know, our rate of return versus some of the rates that Infrastructure Ontario is charging as well. So I look forward to seeing that report. Finally, with regards to supplementary taxes, many years ago we adopted a strategy to reduce our reliance on that. So if I read this paragraph on 11-8 correctly, it says that we're taking a pause this year from reducing that reliance, that the amount is the same as the year past, and then going forward we'll reduce it by a further $75,000 a year.
Mr. Gardner?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct, yes.
Can you speak to the rationale as to why we chose to pause it this year?
The main driver for deciding to pause on it was to manage the overall pressures that the town was facing.
Thank you.
Councillor Gallo.
I was just on let's see where the first one is. 11.5 in terms of debt repayment. I just think that the numbers are or the explanation is reversed between 11.5 debt payment and on 11.8 transfers from DC reserves. Just to take a second look at those, I think there's two references to the wrong numbers. The numbers are right, but the references are.
Mr. Gardner.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe you're correct. We'll fix that in the final iteration. But essentially, the main point here is the main increase in our long-term debt payments related to the JOC debenture is starting to be paid, and it's being paid, or sorry, rather funded 100% through development charges. But we will fix that discrepancy, though.
Thank you.
Councillor Gallo. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you. Could you please talk a little bit more about the pressure the town is facing, and that's why we're keeping the subs at 400,000?
Mr. Gardner.
Through you, Mr. Chair, within the original kickoff report that we've done, it provides a good list of all the pressures that the town is managing, and as part of staying within the at this point 3.5% tax increase ceiling that was given to staff, we're just trying to ensure we stayed underneath that ceiling. And one strategy that we deployed to stay under that was to freeze that 75, to freeze at the current reliance upon SUP level of $350,000. Part of the rationale at the time was we expect SUPs to continue to remain healthy, at least for a few more years, longer than what was originally being projected at the time we looked at our weaning off strategy. So there wasn't no significant harm in delaying that weaning off process by a year.
Councillor Gardner.
But we are, if we're not at build-out, we're almost at build-out. There's only one big piece of land at Bayview in Wellington. So why are you so optimistic?
Mr. Gardner.
Through you, Mr. Chair, our current reliance is $350,000, which is down significantly from the roughly 700 and some thousand or so reliance that we had 4 or 5 years ago or so. I think there's a general recognition that because of infill activity, we're going to have certainly there'll be some ongoing amount of supplementary revenues that will continue to take place. It won't be $350,000, but we felt we had the time to take a 1-year pause and move towards that more perceived end state.
Councillor Gardner.
I personally think that's a mistake, because we're going to be, the reason we were able to do it in the past was because we had so many subs coming in, such a huge amount. And I thought, and I think Councillor Thompson put it in my mind, I think we kind of wanted to get this taken care of before we reached build out. So it's my personal opinion that it's short-sighted. Could I ask you as well on 11.2? Well, I guess it's maybe further to the point. So the SUPs were in 2018 forecasted to October 31st, 2018. They're higher than we anticipated. They're much higher than we anticipated. is that because the builders were building faster? What does that speak to?
Mr. Gardner?
Through you, Mr. Chair. The part of our strategy to wean ourselves off of that reliance was to do it while those subs were still high. So the subs still continue to be healthy. In fact, we'll probably finish up 2018 probably close to $2 million in subs.
Right.
So it's even higher than that figure. But the goal is not to rely upon those $2 million because like in 1 year it's gone. So they've continued to be high for the past several years. So we knew they're going to continue to be high, but we have been reducing that reliance down by $75,000 a year until this coming year.
Thank you, and I suppose it's a larger discussion. Thanks, because in my opinion, subs should never have been used for that. They're supposed to service the people coming in. Can you say on 11.3, just for example, the external audit fees were down quite a bit from our budget. The WSIB costs were up quite a lot. The capital loan payment was, okay, let me just start with the external audit fees. They were a lot lower but the projected is what the projected was for 2018.
Mr. Gardner?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, Councillor Gardner, what was your question?
I just want to
why?
know why, if the external audit fees were fair amount lower than projected, that we're taking it back up to the projected figure. Was it a blip last year?
Well, the $40,000 has been historically we've historically spent lower than the $40,000. Just due to the nature of audits, we don't know what audits will be called or the extent of the audit that gets called. So, for example, for 2018, we just paid the bills for our special JOC audit, and in fact, this $31,000 is actually, I think it's around. I just looked at around $70,000 we finished the year at. So it's actually higher because of the JOC.
Okay, thank you.
So any given year, we don't know what that cost is going to be. So we always try to set the budget somewhere in the middle, and that's where that $40,000. It's been $40,000 for the past 3 or 4 years at least.
Thank you. The same question in reverse about the capital loan payment. It's going up a lot. Is that because of the JOC? Thank you.
Mr. Gardner?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner?
I guess the one that confuses me is the council contingency amount. From 2017 to 2018, it's more than doubled from the budgeted, and now it's going up again. And you did have an explanation here, but I didn't quite understand it.
Mr. Gardner?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it was 2 years ago, council brought their traditional $50,000 contingency down to, I think it's around $35,000 or so, in terms of managing the overall budget. Council decided to leave it there for 2018. What happened over the course of 2018 is we ended up actually spending in excess of that $35,000, closer to the traditional 50. So the thought process was maybe we should bring it back up to the original $50,000 that was in that budget 2 years ago.
Do you remember why we took it down?
I think it was part of the general managing the overall pressure.
Thank you.
Councillor Gardner? Good.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Nobody else for the first time?
Hmm?
Nobody else for the first time?
No one on the list.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that comment with regards to the council contingency account, earlier this year, we adopted a sponsorship policy, and at that time, I had asked our director how much money's in that sponsorship policy. I believe she said there's only $10,000 allocated for 2019. I meant to bring it up during the budget discussions when that tab was brought forward, because I'd like to see that line item have funds within it, and us utilize that sponsorship policy, and rather than decisions being made by council, let our policy dictate those decisions. So I'd like to put forward an amendment. I'd like to see the council contingency line item be cut from 50 to 20,000, and that 30,000 be moved into the sponsorship account.
Second? Councillor Humphries? Comments or questions on that?
If I may,
Yeah, Councillor Thompson, go ahead.
traditionally, we've used that account to fund or sponsor various events. I don't remember too often when we've done it for things that weren't event specific. And so again, I'd rather see it go through a policy than have the money there for council to make those decisions when groups come before it. I don't want to take all the funds out of it. I'll still leave some of it for council to make a decision on how they want to utilize it. But I think that our sponsorship policy, if it's going to work, needs to have some funds associated with it. And so my suggestion is just to take that additional 30, because we only had 20 in it last year. So as we heard, they're bumping it back up to pre-2018 levels, and just move it into sponsorship, and then let the policy dictate how that money is going to be used to support the various events that the town has supported in the past.
Councillor Gilliland, did you want to speak to that? Councillor Gilliland?
You trying to kind of go through the motions and understand it. So if you had gone 20 and 30 and say the contingency for council was 20 grand and it was 30 for the sponsorship, but yet we didn't need the 30 for the sponsorship, but we needed, say, 25 for the council contingency fund, does it make a difference if it's split up that way? Like, I'm just trying to understand, like, if there's a disadvantage to splitting it.
So Councillor, I'll give you a bit of an example, and just to elaborate a little bit on what Councillor Thompson was mentioning. Normally, the council contingency, what we've used it for in past is someone would come forward and say that, you know, can we get a fee waived, or can we look for a grant or something? And then council would say, listen, why don't we just take it from our council contingency and fund this project or fund this special event or that type of thing. We've created that a sponsorship policy now, and we've approved that. And so, Councillor Thompson, I believe in Councillor Thompson, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe he's mentioning that since we've created that policy, so now instead of moving forward and having people come to the mic and asking us for money and us looking at giving them that money and approving that money from the council contingency, is that we point them and steer them in the direction of that new policy that we've created, and they fill out and go through that policy in the forms, and then they can get approval for sponsorship funds from that program instead of coming here and asking us, and for us looking at approving it from the council contingency. So it's just to top up that sponsorship program with funds. Am I capturing the essence of what are you understanding that?
Yeah, I'm understanding that portion. It was just more or less what you're saying is that people can still come up and ask for money within that 20,000, but the 30 is towards a new policy of sponsorship. So
Yes.
you're asking for two different things, two different methods.
No,
Is
we
it
actually,
kind of, or?
so when they would come up, I think that the reason we created the policy, the sponsorship policy, is for when people do come up, we can say to them and we can mention to them that we have a new policy. You're better off going this route, because that's how we want to move forward, is to have a fair and equitable sponsorship policy that allows for people to fill out the forms and get approved for funding through that type of method, instead of just coming up here and where we hear something and then just decide to approve monies going out.
Okay, so fair enough. I completely get that, and I like the idea of pushing it that way. So if we're kind of like near the end of a year and we have this, call it $6,000 in the council contingency, and we want to move it into the sponsorship side, we could do that if we needed to. If we were kind of lower on, like if we had used that up, is that the same thing? I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
I think later on, we could always shift that money, if it, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. CEO, we could shift that money, because once it's approved, it's there within the budget, but we could shift it around if we really had to.
Through Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct. We probably wouldn't, for a relatively small amount like that, we probably wouldn't go to the trouble of doing an in-year budget adjustment. We would probably just overspend the sponsorship budget and then report back to council that, you know, we had extra expenses that fell within the policy, and we could always point to the fact that the council contingency or another one was underspent, and so we had, you know, the resources to make that administrative decision.
Okay.
Councilor Gilliland?
Yep, that explains it. Thank you.
Councilor Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we are going to call this something else. We're going to call it, like, there'll be a separate line item.
We already have a line item for the
And
sponsorship.
is there any money in there?
10,000.
There's 10,000. So now we're going to put in
We're going to put in another, what Councilor Thompson
another
is requi-
30,000.
Take 30 from the contingency, council contingency.
Right.
Shift it over to the sponsorship line item.
So
And then
that'll give 40,000.
That would give 40,000 in the sponsorship program and leave 20 in the council contingency.
Thank you. So from the figures on 11.3, we spent $25,000 towards that end in 2018. And now we're going to put 40 in?
Are you talking about the council contingency?
Yeah, well, the council contingency went from 20 to 45.6.
And so I would kind of reiterate a little bit of what Councilor Thompson was mentioning. Normally, and you know as well as I do, sitting here, we tend to fund some sponsorship that would now possibly go through that sponsorship program instead. So we might not hit that mark.
I'm actually referring, okay, but so with the amount, we only spent 25, let's say 26,000
Mhm.
for that purpose, and now we're putting in 40,000.
Mr. CO?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if I might try to, I don't have before me the actual breakdown of the 45, and we really need to run a year or so with the policy to see how it really flushes out. We anticipate that the majority of the requests that council has funded would fall within the sponsorship policy, but we're expecting that there'll be some other ones that don't fit the policy and don't align for an administrative decision to be made. And so that's why we're leaving the 20 in there. But it's not a precise number, it's more of an estimate based on past practice.
Councilor Gardner?
Well, that makes sense. Where, at the end of the day, where did the money come out of for the decrease in rent for the ACC, for the fundraiser? The fundraiser at the community center for the gentleman who was...
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I believe that at the time that motion directed that come from council contingency. There was a motion passed by council, although it was much less than the motion that was passed.
I thought the motion was for you to find the money. I don't remember saying a source. Thank you.
Councilor Gardner?
No, it sounds like a wise move, and we'll see how it goes for the year.
Councilor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to confirm, did staff develop a sponsorship policy that we saw?
We approved it
Recently?
in January.
Okay, just recently. I don't recall that a number being, was it 10,000 that we were
It
going to
was
say?
10,000.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Thompson, then, is there a reason why you chose 30,000 to put in? Like, if we were happy with 10,000, why are we increasing it by another 30? Just to be generous.
Councilor Thompson?
Historically, it was 20,000, and then it got bumped up to 50,000, and so that's what was in the rationale in the information before us. So, that's why I just said rather than increase the contingency from the previous 20 to 50, that 30,000, take that 30,000 and move it over to sponsorship and just keep that historical amount of 20,000 as the line item. If council wants to debate the right number or more or less, fine, or as was indicated by Councillor Gilliland, that, you know, we can always make an in-year adjustment or do something like that, that's fine. I just think that, you know, what's happened in the past, and we're all fairly aware of it, is people have come to the podium and asked to support certain events, and the staff say, well, it's not in our budget, and so inevitably, council makes a decision and funds it out of the council contingency. We have a policy, and we now have a framework to make those decisions, but we need to, you know, give staff the ability to carry through and implement that, and for that, they need funds. And so it would normally come out of our council contingency without any framework. Now I'm just saying, take the 30,000. If you want to reduce council contingency even further to 10,000 and say, take that 40 and move it into sponsorship, I'm fine with that too.
Councillor Kim?
Thank you. Like in the past, our contingency fund, I mean, we've had 50,000, but we rarely ever use 50,000, as Councillor Thompson mentioned. And, you know, to be honest, I'm thinking, why even raise it? Because if we have, the more funds we have in the sponsorship fund, the more, you know, potentially we're going to be giving out. I'm not sure whether council should be in the business of being the giver of last resort necessarily. I mean, we have a lot of budget pressures, even for $10,000-$20,000 asks from our current partners. So for me, I'd rather have less than more. So that's the reason for the ask. But if everyone else is fine with the number, I'm not going to debate it, because it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to use it. But when you do have a larger amount, then any of the ask could easily be obliged. And again, I'm not sure if that's where we should be leaning towards, and I think that's just the context of my comments.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Kim. Councillor Humphreys?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, I think it's a good idea. We're faced with this all the time, and if there's a policy, it kind of allows everyone to go through that fair policy, and I think it goes. I think 30,000 is fair because history shows we don't rarely go. 20,000 is about all we use year after year. I don't think we've seen any spikes throughout the years on council, so I think that's pretty good. Just a question: where's this? Is there a line item for sponsorship programs in front of us right now? Because I just can't seem to. I don't have it. I don't think we need to probably see it, but just.
Mr. CEO, I think it's in the communications.
Is it in the communications section? Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure. So we have 10,000 in there. We're going to be adding 30,000 more. No, I think it's fair because more and more we have community groups with some great initiatives and events where they're very worthwhile charities that we're here making these decisions. So I think it's great that we go through policy. It's there. It's funded, and maybe we can get like a quarterly update on how much is left or who's been utilizing it, and where it's gone, and just keeping maybe an update on how it's going. But good idea, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. Anyone else? Seeing none. Call Councillor Thompson. Last. Yep.
In respect to Councillor Kim's comments, I mean, we could start here. If at the end of the budget process we find that the 40,000 for sponsorship isn't enough, when you include the original 10, we can always make a final adjustment, but at least here there's no net tax pressure. It's just, rather than stick it in this account, we're sticking it in that account.
Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. So we're back. So I need someone to move. Waiting for it to pop up. Oh, Councillor Gallo. You guys hit those buttons quick.
It's not necessarily on the agenda, and I don't remember if it was in the past, but I just want to make sure I'm not ready now, but I want to make sure I have an opportunity to speak to the 5-year operating budget history. most likely at our next meeting. If we could either have it under new business or something
Yep.
where I could
If
speak to and ask questions on that.
Did you, I mean, if you want to speak to it. You're not ready? We can do it at the next one.
Yeah.
Councilor Keller, we'll do it at the next one.
Yeah.
When you're ready to speak to it, by all means. Councilor Gardner?
Thank you. I'm on page 11.9. I'm back to the supplementary taxes. So I know that in 2018, we put down $750,000 is the amount. We knew we were going to get more than that, but we put $750,000. So with this amount of over $2 million, is that a lot more than we expected to bring in?
Mr. Gardner?
Through you, Mr. Chair. I believe we're originally budgeting, I think it's around $750,000. And so we brought in around I think we're going to bring in around $2 million. So we did bring in more than what we're anticipating. That's okay, because we have a policy where any excess is contributed again to replenish the reserves of the corporation and make them healthier with those funding.
Right. I just wondered if it was a lot more than we anticipated would actually come in, and if it was, can we use some of that towards decreasing the $400,000 reliance to $300,000 without affecting the tax rate?
Mr. Gardner or Mr. CO?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that extra that comes in flows into the previous calendar year and just goes to reserve. And then we, once again, try to anticipate what we think those supplementals will be. And it's very much a moving target, because not only is it a function of the actual development activity and when it occurs, but it's further complicated by the fact that it really depends on when MPAC actually gets around to showing that assessment on the roll. So in some cases, homes can be can be occupied and in use for periods exceeding a year sometimes in extreme situations, and so all of that tax revenue comes in so there could be a home, for example, when you look at the 2018 numbers, I bet you there is an example or two of some open files where the home was occupied in 2017, no tax bills were sent in 2018 because they weren't on our roll, and then it shows up on the roll and we get to assess a retroactive tax bill. So there's both predicting the actual flow of when development's going to occur and when it's going to come online, and then again also trying to anticipate when MPAC's going to get it on the roll. And having worked with MPAC from the board side, I can tell you that this is an ongoing problem for MPAC. They come in, it kind of goes in waves. They'll get on top of things and everything will be good, and then they'll fall behind. It's been a particular problem in the GTA where the growth has been as extreme as it has, and there's been many complaints making it all the way to the board level how hard it is for municipalities to budget their supplementals when the peaks and valleys are so extreme.
Councilor Gardner?
Thank you. And so we send out a tax bill for maybe a full year all at once. And do we send out any information saying we haven't received your assessment yet? You better plan for this.
Mr. CO?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, because we technically don't know, like from a tax perspective, we don't know that house is taxable yet until MPAC informs us that it's on the roll.
Except we consider it occupied when we issue the permit. And this taxes start from that date, so we would know that.
Mr. CO?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I guess we could technically try to figure that out, but really there's no incentive for us to do that because the homeowner's aware that once they're in the home, that taxes are accruing. Their lawyers and so on would inform them of that if it was a new purchase, so it really isn't worth our time, quite frankly. Okay, thank you. I guess the last question for now is, if we reduce the budget, we haven't, I think there's a couple things we haven't approved outright and others that we're not sure about. So then we could
we could take that savings and put it on to reducing the subs.
It's a consideration.
Thank you. It worries me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Get someone to move the motion as amended. Councillor Thompson, Councillor Gilliland. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Next up, water and sewer budget. So we're going to talk about number 1 and number 2. Mr. Downey, you're up.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Jason and I are going to be working on this together. The budget process for water is something certainly new to me, and how we arrived at these numbers was always a bit of a mystery. So I hope to be unveiling the curtain, giving you a little bit better idea of how we actually arrive at a water budget and some of the steps we take in order to get to that point. And then Jason will be answering any questions with regards to the numbers that are related to those things. But I felt it was important that we understood how we got the numbers that we got and what factors go into to those numbers. So with that, I want to walk you through the water budget process. So first of all, there's guiding principles. It's a user pay philosophy with regards to water. It also has to be a cost recovery system. So we have to identify the costs, and those costs must be recovered. However, at the end of the day, we're supposed to have a balanced budget in that we are not to bring in more revenues than the expenses, and we shouldn't have higher expenses than we do revenues coming in. And so you'll see each year at the beginning of the budget, you will note that the water budget zeroes out. And the water usage estimates are based upon what we call an adjusted York Region estimate. Why we call it an adjusted York Region estimate is York Region tells us what they think, or the amount of water that they feel we're going to be using. However, historically, they have been, those numbers have been larger than, the quantities have been larger than they had estimated. So they lower those estimates, or they feel we're going to use less water, and then we end up using more water, and that creates an issue with regards to surplus, and I'll explain that a little bit later on. So we adjust those numbers from a year-to-year basis because, as I said, our goal is to get to a zero budget at the end of the year. So the expenses are the regional costs, and the region charges us for water, and the region charges us for wastewater. I believe this year it's somewhere around $18 million that the region charges us for those two. We have corporate overhead, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And we have contributions to our reserves in support of the asset sustainability in 3 areas: our water infrastructure, our wastewater infrastructure, and our stormwater infrastructure. And we have non-billable water. We have water that we cannot account for or cannot be accounted for just through the business practices that we have within the municipality. So the regional costs. So right now people ask, well, where's our water come from? Well, 51% of our water comes from the City of Toronto and Peel region. And 48% comes from our 6 regional wells. The water and wastewater, the wholesale costs have experienced a combined increase of 9% from 2017 to 2022 in support of infrastructure renewal by the region. So the region in 2017 said that they were going to be raising their wastewater rates by 9% each year in order to support the reserve balance for wastewater. So you will see some wastewater increases go up, and that is a direct result of the region downloading those costs on the water bill. So the corporate overhead. These are all the different areas that we look at when dealing with the corporate overhead. There's a chargeback with regards to communication, treasurer, water bills, water billings, the staff that deal with water billings, payroll, accounts payable, Access Aurora, we take many of the phone calls with regards to water, operations oversight, financial planning, IT, telecommunications, the list goes on and on. And that is done each year. We review those numbers each year, and we did it once again this year. Certainly, that was my first time through this in detail with regards to how we attribute corporate overhead costs to the water budget. Contributions to reserves in support of our asset sustainability. I talked about the 3 reserves. They're the water reserve, sanitary sewer reserve, and the stormwater reserve. We require contributions from each of these reserves, and they're driven by our 10-year asset management plan. The stormwater reserve is something that engineering is looking at right now. Presently, we have a flat rate, and so as a residential property, you pay a flat rate. And as a ICI property, you pay a flat rate, a different flat rate, and those funds support that reserve. Development engineering is looking at perhaps a different method in collecting that. Stormwater reserves are unique to municipalities. Some have them, some don't. Some collect them in various ways, and we are looking at models throughout York Region of how we might make modifications to ours. Right now, we're looking, I believe, at the Newmarket model, perhaps, and making some revisions to that. But regardless of how we arrive or how we collect the money, we do collect money to put into that stormwater reserve. Asset sustainability costs are significant, and I wanted to give you a little bit of a picture of just how big an issue this is. As per legislation, all water, wastewater, and stormwater rate renewal costs must be borne by the ratepayers. So the town's assets, we have 217 kilometers of water main. We have 189 kilometers of sanitary sewers, 181 kilometers of storm sewers, a little over 5,000 catch basins, 64 storm ponds, and almost 1,500 fire hydrants, of which 289 are actually on a private property, which is part of our issue with regards to non-billable water, but I'll get to that right now. Non-billable water. This is water that's lost from our billable system. Right now, we're sitting at 13.5%. So that number has come down, actually, from a high in 16 or 15 of 17%. However, it is slightly higher than the regional average of 11%. How do we arrive at 13.5%? What factors go into that amount of water, or that loss of water? Well, our flushing of the mains. So we flush mains on a regular basis in order to make sure that we keep up our chlorine residual, and so that water is not accounted for. We don't meter that water as we flush those mains. Fire suppression. Each time the fire department goes out and hooks up to a hydrant, we don't meter it, and so every time there's fire suppression, that water is lost. Faulty meters. Meters that don't record the amount of water that is going through them. Meters only fail in that water goes through and isn't read. It can't go the other way. And so it's one of our issues with regards to our water meter replacement program is that we want to make sure that we capture as many of these faulty meters as possible. Water main breaks. Water that's lost in water main breaks, leaks within our system, theft. As I said, we have 289 private hydrants. There is an opportunity for theft from those hydrants, and that is something that we continue to monitor. And then we also have our corporate parkland use for our ice rinks, our water play and irrigation systems, and none of those systems are metered. So that all goes towards that 13.5%. We are making efforts in order to continue to deal with that. That number is still too high in our opinion, but we're working towards lowering it. I don't think we'll ever get down to a zero. However, it is helpful to know to what extent some of these things add to that 13.5%. Because as you can imagine, we're not going to stop flushing mains. We're not going to stop doing fire suppression. There's always going to be water main breaks. So there's always going to be lost or non-billable water. So let's talk about the revenue side. The revenue side is water usage, sanitary usage, and our stormwater rate. With regards to water and wastewater, the retail revenues are driven by multiple variables. First of all, the estimated compared to the actual water consumption, the total estimated gross operating costs required to deliver the water and the wastewater services, the total required contributions to reserves in support of the wastewater assets sustainability, and the wholesale regional cost of the water, as well as wastewater treatment. And actually, we pay more for wastewater treatment than we do actually pay for the water. Right now, I think we're sitting at around $11 million in wastewater costs from the region, and we're around $7 million for water. But Jason will be able to tell you those numbers better than I. I think I'm right, though. Thanks. Stormwater rate. Stormwater rate, as I said, is unique to each municipality. It's a flat rate for residents and ICI properties, and the town is currently exploring alternatives, and I talked about that earlier in my presentation. So the illustration of the calculation of the water and wastewater rate is the total estimated operating cost, so that's the wholesale cost of the water, the contributions to the reserves, the maintenance and repair cost, and the corporate overhead, divided by what that region says is the estimated water usage, and we come out with a required rate per cubic meter, and that's the math. So we figure out what all our expenses are, figure out what our revenues are going to be, and we come out with what our expenses are going to be. Divide that by the amount of water we think we're going to be using that year, and that comes up with the rate. It's not much more complicated than that. Now, what can influence some of the numbers? So the fluctuations, so a surplus or a deficit is created based on how accounts and estimates of usage were at the beginning of the year. So if we don't estimate the amount of water that we think we're going to be using properly at the beginning of the year, we're going to run into a deficit or we're going to run into a surplus. So if we guess that we're going to use too little water, then we're going to run into a surplus at the end of the year, because we base all our costs on that smaller amount of water. And then when a larger amount of water is used, we still collect money for it, but we have no expenses to go against it. So that's all revenues. Whereas if we estimated too large a number and then didn't use that much water, we now aren't collecting enough in order to pay our expenses. So we run into a deficit. Surplus and deficits can also be created by fluctuations in our operating expenses. So work that we maybe proposed to do within our operating budget in order for revenues against that, for expenses against those revenues, we may not do, or it might come in a little bit less expensive. And so if we lower our operating expenses, then at the end of the year, we're going to have a surplus. Those surpluses go into our reserves, and so it helps keep a healthy reserve. But then we use that information in order to help build a better budget for the next year. So that's how we get to a water budget. I hope that's helpful. I'll answer any questions you have, and specifically with numbers. You can ask Jason.
Councillor Gilliland?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I was wondering if you can kind of touch on the storm water rate and the options that you're exploring through Newmarket, and if that's going to affect maybe our projection with our reserve fund, how prepared we are for stormwater management as we are facing a lot more climate change. We do need to look at building up those reserves, and have we budgeted for that?
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, two questions there. First of all, I think we need to do a better job. This is my opinion, but I think we need a better job figuring out what we how much money we need and what we need it for. So we've been really working hard with engineering to determine how much money do we need, what money should be put into the reserves. And I think we're getting better at getting that answer, but we have gone through some consultant reports that have identified the maintenance procedures for each of those 64 storm ponds, when that work needs to be done, how much that work needs to be done, and we can then, very much like we do for our 10-year forecast, figure out how much money we're going to need in each year. So we're getting better at figuring out how much money we need. Now, how we collect that money it was the first part of your question, and there are different methods in which to do that. We use a flat rate method. It's fairly administratively, it's fairly simple. However, it's not necessarily fair, in that every residential property is charged the same flat rate, no matter where you live and how big your lot is, whether you live in a townhouse or whether you live in a 3-acre lot, you're paying the same. It's a residential lot. So fairness comes into it a little bit. And so that's the system that we are looking at trying to deal with, is the fairness part of that, and Anka can talk a little bit more about that. It's a much more complicated process. You actually have to calculate the amount of impermeable surface that each lot has, because that's water that can't get into the groundwater and is going to run into our sewers. So the more impervious surface you have, the higher your rate.
Makes
and
sense.
the more groundwater recharge you can have, the less water you pay. And then there's you can also do incentives, so that if you do things on your lot that improve the amount of stormwater that does not go into our systems, then perhaps we can give you a little bit of a credit. So it's as I say, it's a much more complicated process. It even becomes more complicated when you're getting into the ICI aspect of it, because that's a constant moving target, because there's constantly additions being put onto plants, additional parking lots, or reduced or different uses that create a different impact on our stormwater system. So it isn't something that's going to happen overnight. Meanwhile, we need to figure out how much money we actually need to collect and make sure our rates are reflective of that. So you may pay less or you may pay more, but at the end of the day, the community of Aurora is all going to pay the same amount of money. We're not looking for more.
Councillor Gilliland?
Does that help?
Yes, it does. No, it was perfect, and I got a lot of takeaway points from that, so that's good. I'm glad to hear that we're on top of that. Do we have an understanding of the health of our reserves right now, and how prepared we are for a storm that could kind of upset the community? Do we know how prepared we are for that?
So the short answer is, well, it's a yes and a no, quite frankly. I'm sorry. So we have somewhat of an idea. However, one of the things that we have dealt with or started with the engineering department once again is we have put money into the water operating budget. So that's one of those corporate overheads that the water rate's paying for, to closed circuit TV all the storm and sanitary sewers throughout the town. And we're doing 10% of the town each year. So after a 10-year period, we will know everything that's happening. So right now, we have a pretty good idea, but we don't have a detailed idea. What we do is we then take that, and we've already got some of our information from our first year, because we've started the program. Actually, the Chief Administrative Officer and I were looking at a couple of those movies the other day, and just to show kind of some of the things we're looking at. And what we're going to do is we then take that information. We get recommendations of what we need to do in order to repair, replace, fix that, or whatever. We also tie that into the road reconstruction program from the engineering department. That then translates into a capital operating request for the following year for council consideration. And then the next year we do 10%. And that then translates into a capital ask. So after a 10-year period, we should start all over again, but we should be in a much better place. And we're obviously going to start, maybe it's not obvious, but we are going to start with the oldest infrastructure first, because that's you would think probably in the worst shape, and then we'll move towards the newer infrastructure.
Councillor Gilliland?
Thank you. And just one more question, and this might be one for Ms. McCall. Are we preparing this new infrastructure for the 1 in 100-year storm, or is it the 1 in 250-year storm?
For you, Mr. Mayor, for 1 in 100-year storm, yes, this is what it is in the design criteria. Not yet for 1 in the 200-year storm, but we will have a request for a budget for funding next year in 2020 to create climate change adaptation and mitigation plan as a capital project. And at that time, we will look what we have to change in the design criteria to for adaptation, for adapt our infrastructure to climate change. And with the studies that we are doing in energy conservation this year, we'll create a mitigation plan. This means to low carbon footprint business service for the town and reduction in GHG, greenhouse gas emissions.
Councillor Gilliland?
That's good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kim?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In one of your slides, Mr. Downey, there was a category for non-billable water, which we discuss every year. Is there a way, because that category, non-billable hours, it gives everyone the impression that it's water that's wasted. But as you know, as you indicated on the slide, there's flushing of mains, fire suppression, corporate parkland use. So water is being used to service the community. Things like theft, it's hard to put a value on that. But is there a way that we can tighten that up so that we can create a separate category for for water that we cannot explain? Things like corporate parkland use and, as mentioned, fire suppression, we know that water is going towards that use. Is there any way that we can divide those two figures so that that number for public consumption purposes can, I think for public awareness, I think it would reflect better on us to separate those categories.
Mr. Downey?
There's some things we can and there's some things we can't do. So historically, for parkland use, we have metered that in the past. So we have a pretty good idea how much water we use, and it doesn't vary very much. However, ice rinks are a good example. We metered all the water coming out of ice rinks there for a period of time, just so we have some idea how much water we use. So we can capture that, and we can give you some historical data with regards to that. But as you can appreciate, that's seasonal. Sometimes we use more and sometimes we use less, depending on just how cold that winter is. Water play is fairly easy to do and put a meter on that. Irrigation systems aren't that complicated either. So that's a number that we have a pretty good handle on right now, and used to be actually charged separately to the water bill out of the park's operating budget. With regards to the rest, extremely difficult to do. Fire suppression and flushing of mains is just ongoing operational costs, and very difficult to do. What you could perhaps estimate, if we knew that it was being flushed for a certain period of time, we could do some calculations with regards to the pressure and the size of the pipe and figure out we've got so many cubic meters more than likely coming out of that hydrant. So that's something perhaps we could do, and the fire department could do the same thing. If they had their pumpers running for X number of hours or whatever, we'd have some idea. But that's, as you can appreciate, isn't something that they're interested in during the heat of a blaze. They're interested in making sure that they do that suppression and not exactly how much water they're using. So getting those numbers post the event would be somewhat difficult to do. Faulty meters is a door we're trying to close. So we don't have a real good handle on how much water we're using as a result of faulty meters. And so I think we need to do, I think that's a door that we can close from a residential perspective. After that, we then need to get to the ICI, and that is somewhat of a bigger problem because we're just talking about the water volumes are so much greater. Theft, one of the things that we're looking at with regards to theft are flow monitors within our system. And what the flow monitors will do is will tell us where peak flows are happening. So we've actually used them in the past, and we will get readings that we have unusually high flow volumes at 2 o'clock in the morning in a particular area. And that doesn't make sense. So we would then investigate that and find out that perhaps that was done, there was theft happening at that plant, or they were doing something unusual, and that would answer that question. But at least we'd have some indication of where some of those things were happening. Leaks are something that are very difficult to detect. Some go on for a long period of time before they actually surface. That's why you see sinkholes and things like that. That leak may have occurred years ago, and it just took a long time to finally get to a point where it's undermined and broken. So these aren't easy numbers to deal with, unfortunately.
Thank you, Mr. Downey. You don't have to go through every single bullet.
Sorry.
But I guess my point was, if I would encourage staff that maybe in subsequent budgets that if we could even, like you said, using historical numbers that we have on parkland use, and even we pay 40% of our the fire budget. So if they can simply they capture incidences, and all we need to know is was it on for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, just even a rough estimate, then we can reduce that 13.5% to something more more realistic, perhaps, even though it's an estimate. That would be great. My second question is, I'm not sure if to yourself or Jason, do we actually have the actuals for water for 2018? And whether they were, were they favorable, non-favorable, and how much?
Mr. Gardner?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe we do have those numbers. I would have to get that number for you. But we overall, I believe, had higher consumption than what we were projecting, which generated an overall higher rate of retail revenues, but also a higher rate of wholesale costs as well. I think the overall, I don't want to say, I'll wait till you see the year-end report there, but I believe overall the consumption was higher than what was projected.
Okay.
Councillor Kim?
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. Through to Mr. Downey. Along those same lines, Al, with regards to the estimated 13.5%, can we convert that into dollars? What is the lost revenue of that non-billable amount?
Mr. Downey?
Yeah. So right now we're paying about $18 million a year for regional water.
So 13.5% is roughly
So
$2 million.
13.5% of $18 million. Okay. It's a number.
So you're, I'd say over 2.2, something like that, 2.3.
So appreciate that. So then going back to the list that you've done, and I understand the challenge in being able to identify it, but we all agree that, corporate parkland, fire suppression, flushing of mains, those are activities that need to continue. Are we not able to separate that out of that 13.5%? Because we're estimating that as our loss. I mean, does it make up 10%, 25%, 50% of that non-billable amount? Surely we must have some guesstimates along that, because to me those are acceptable, and you'll never get to zero. I agree. In the retail world, we talk about loss prevention and theft within stores, and you'll never get to zero. But there is an acceptable limit that most organizations strive for, and so. To me, the concern is the faulty meters, the water main breaks, the leaks, and the thefts, and that's the number that I'd like to get a better handle on. What is that number as opposed to the 13.5%?
Well,
Mr. Downey?
Through Mr. Mayor, as I said earlier, we can get close on some of those. Some of them are guesses. If we had a target, it would be the region's average. So I think we need to at least get there,
Which is?
which is 11. Okay.
But that would include those acceptable pieces of the flushing the mains,
Correct.
the fire suppression.
Correct. Because each municipality actually, we have a number, and I don't know if you have it in the report or not, but it right now is at 11 something, or is it 11.0? I can't recall. 11.3? 11.3. So if we could find another 2%, that would be, I think we'd be doing well as far as the target goes. And so to get us there, we are going to be looking at, as I said to Councillor Kim, I can get some of the historical numbers as far as corporate use. I can find out if there seems to be a drop after we replace some of these meters. Even taking some of the meters out and testing them to find out whether or not there's even a big difference there. It's hard to say, but that's something that we need to do. So,
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. And just to understand, I guess, the basic math, are we able to identify the total amount of water brought in? And that's how we've come to that estimate of 13.5%? Because we can say, okay, water comes from, as you showed in your earlier slide, from the City of Toronto, through the region, and from the 6 different wells. So we know the total amount of water that's being brought into the system. We know what we've billed, and that excess is really the loss.
yep, and that's simple math.
Okay.
We pay the region X number of dollars or number of cubic meters. We bill X number of cubic meters, and the difference is 13.5%.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. I just want to make one point, basically on both councillors' comments. I would like to see, if possible, a separation of those flushing of mains, fire suppression, and the corporate parkland use such as rinks, and identify that separately, because those are things that we have to do continuously. And so I agree. I mean, I think that's a number that we can separate from that and then get that true loss percentage. And to me, that's the way I'm looking at it as well. And I think that's what Councillor Thompson and Councillor Kim are getting at, if I'm not mistaken. So if we can, I think for future budgets, I would agree. I would like to see that as well. So, Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Gilliland did such a great job with her questions. I have almost nothing left to ask. Councillor Gilliland and myself and Ms. Mahal went to a fantastic workshop on Friday, and hopefully we're going to bring a lot of information back to council because we learned a lot. I agree with two of my comments are on messaging. I think we need to change the messaging on this and say, presently we estimate 13% of water is non-billable. Part of this is used to service the community, to service our residents. And then even if we don't have an exact number, but to say, part of this is to service you, and part of it is because of, water main leaks or whatever. I think it's fair that way. It's more accurate that way as well. The other thing about messaging is, and you have in your report that a combined increase of 9% from 2017 to 2022 is coming down from the region to support infrastructure renewal or sustainability. This has been going on since at least 2010, and it was supposed to be time limited. I don't know if nobody was here at that time. It was supposed to be time limited. The region said, okay, we'll do it for 6 or 8 years until our reserves are healthy. And that's what the residents were expecting. They weren't that happy about it. But now we have a different situation where it's been continuing. So I think we need to do some careful messaging about that, because the residents are really not happy about the increase. I mean, I think we could work on it, because it's not our fault.
Well, I mean, if you want to go down that road as far as issues at the regional level, I agree. I mean, we just finished having that discussion about the 1%, and this is similar to that, as far as when you add something, as far as new revenue coming in to the regional level, it's never going to disappear. And that's the problem with adding something like that. And so even though they said it back in 2010 that, you know what, we'll add it, it's only going to be for a limited time and we're going to remove it. I'll tell you right now, it's very difficult for everyone sitting around that table to all of a sudden say, oh, we don't want this money anymore and remove it. And so that's why it still continues to be there. But some of us are fighting to try to make some changes there. So hopefully we can make those changes.
And I'm aware of your fight, and I thank you for it. This is a slightly different situation in that we never charged for water. So we had infrastructure that we never had money to maintain it. So the province said, well, you got to do this. You got to figure out how to make the full life of your system sustainable. So I don't know why. Maybe you could find out why it continues. Did they underestimate the amount of money that would be needed?
I'll get
So
you. I'll get
find
you
out
more
what you
information.
can about that. But for our residents, they are not happy, and it may go past 2022. And the messaging is that we really need to do this. These are very important systems for, for your enjoyment of life and health. And unfortunately, this money has to be spent. And we're sorry about it. Something nice. To you, Cindy, something nice, but something that really explains that we need to do this. And it's not coming down from the town. Oh, one last question. Al, I saw in your report one of the, maybe future successes is going to be the building of the baseball diamonds. And one thing we did learn at the workshop was that before parks are built, you can do catchment systems underneath the parks. And it's a really good way to do it, because what you have are holding tanks that can easily be cleaned out much more cost effectively than stormwater management ponds, and you also get better quality water coming out of that. So is that something that we might consider to do? I don't know if it would be a lot of extra money, but it would be a really good pilot project.
Mr. Downey?
So through you, Mr. Mayor. Last week we had discussions with regards to that.
Great.
So staff are looking into that. It's also a requirement from the Conservation Authority. So there are opportunities for stormwater management and some holding areas. We actually have, when we built the water play in Ada Johnson, we put an underground tank in, if you recall. We draw the water from that tank to water the flowers.
Great.
On Yonge Street and throughout the community. So that's not so that's water that's already had one use going into those plants. So we don't use potable water into our planters. So there are reuse systems that we can look at, and that's one of the incentives that I was talking about with regards to ANCA's plan is that if there are incentives available, then people can do them, and they may, and there's a cost benefit analysis to that.
Councilor Gardner?
Thank you. I'm not sure I knew that. 2 points. I think the water being stored in the tanks, I think it also actually filtrates into the soil. So it's not a matter of reuse, it's a matter of actually going back where Mother Nature intended it to go. I'm not sure about that. But I'm sure it will cost more money in the short term, but maybe you'll be able to. Well, I'd like you to keep council in the loop with anything that you're doing. And maybe Lake Simcoe, if they mandate it, maybe they want to contribute to it.
I think maybe our representative at Lake Simcoe should ask that question.
Mr. CEO, you were going to ask a couple of questions, I thought. Okay, we'll discuss that.
Is that all? Councilor Gardner? Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Humphreys?
Hey, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, many of my questions have been answered or I've asked around the table, and one obviously in particular is if there's a percentage against each of these factors that attribute to the non-billable water. everything's been answered that or the questions have been asked, but with this, obviously every municipality, every is facing this, and they're all trying to understand where the waste, not waste, but not billable waters. Is there anything in terms of technology that might be coming down the pipes that can help us with this? I mean, some sort of way that we can calculate this a little closer through technology. Have you heard of anything like this in terms of, even the fire suppression, anything? Is there
Mr.
anything?
Downing?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, flow monitors would help. We could be looking at flow monitors, and that's something that we've been discussing around staff for quite a bit, because I think that does a couple of things. It highlights our high use areas, right. But I think it will give us some metrics with regards to some of these, so that when there is a fire and I see that flow monitor go, and I can now do some calculations myself with regards to that. So, but that's a capital cost, and so that's something that we're looking at. Other technologies that we're looking at was the lining of the water mains. So the lining of the water mains was a great plan. For a couple of things. First of all, it helped with the leaks, but more importantly, it helped with breaks. And we get very few water main breaks compared to our regional partners. So it really helped with the strength of those pipes. And so with the fewer water main breaks, the less non-billable water that spills. So that's a technology that we're certainly going to continue looking at and hitting some of those hot spots, but we're down to maybe 5 or 6 water main breaks, which is remarkable. We had more last year for some strange reason, but we had 2 the year before type of thing. So it really is great technology. But I think we need to monitor the flow. I think that's going to help us the most, and that's going to help put some numbers to some of these. I just felt it was important that we knew what this number was, because we can't fix it if we don't know what it is.
Right. No, that's great. Hopefully we can get there from a capital perspective. If there's something that can help us, get into that type of detail and distance to
that puts extra pressure on the water budget, as you can appreciate.
Understood. But I love what Councillor Gartner said, in terms of communication. I mean, all these things are part of services, whether, positive or not. It is reality, and it's something that we should be able to get out there and communicate clearly that, I know it's frustrating, but these things happen every day, and here's some of the initiatives that we're doing to help monitor and prevent, and potentially a future technology through flow monitor somehow will get us into more detail, but it is a fact, and I think explaining it would be a great initiative moving forward. So thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Gallo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I would agree with most of my colleagues in terms of capturing those. And I think Mr. Downey's right. The theft, leaks, and probably water main are going to be really tough to measure. The others, I guess, with water meters or check meters, you'd be able to gather what those are. I seem to remember faintly, and I can ask tomorrow, that the fire department does, whenever they, I guess, fill their vehicles. I may be wrong, and I'll find out tomorrow, but I seem to remember asking them this question way back. If they don't, they should, if only just to capture it. In the report, and I know maybe we're talking about
No, you can talk about the report, yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry?
Yeah, you can talk about the report. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's just to, the numbers in there, I'm tilting my head because it's on, I can't get it to go landscape. The 2018 forecast to year end only for water was a deficit of 310,000, which is about 9%. I don't know how much that means. The total budget for water was 9.9 million.
Councillor, can we just get a page on that?
That's 1410.
1410? Thank you.
And the total budget, I guess for all 3 components, is 23.88 million. which is from budget to budget a 14% increase. Am I reading that correctly?
Jeez.
Mr. Gardner?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, you are.
Councillor Gallo?
Yeah, and just along the lines of messaging, I think that's in the last, it's got to be 5 or 6 years. I think if we look at our water rate, that curve's got to be like really, really steep. It has to be, and I'm not sure everyone understands why, but I think we have to do. We have to put some effort into letting people know why. I constantly hear, even recently, why is our water so much more expensive than it used to be, and I don't have an answer. So yeah, it's. I think it's. I would agree that messaging is going to be really important.
Thank you, Councillor Gallo. Councillor Gardner, second time.
Al, you may not know this. Have we ever caught anybody with theft of water? And could we put some sort of alarm on a fire hydrant, or some sort of technology on a fire hydrant, so that you know where I'm going with this?
Mr. Downey?
So, through Mr. Mayor, the answer to that is yes. We have caught people, thanks to diligent residents who give us a call and say, hey, I think something's going on, and they give us a call. It's one of the issues of private hydrants is very difficult to monitor a private hydrant. So you go to a lot of these industrial units, and they have hydrants way back on their property. We have no idea what water truck's coming there in the middle of the night filling up. And so that is so that certainly is an issue. I know why they're there for fire suppression, but it does create an issue with regards to theft.
Thank you.
And if I might, Mr. Mayor, with regards to communication, Stephanie and I have been meeting on a regular basis, and it's one of my priorities, and her priorities is to get messaging out to the residents about water. I think it's a mystery that needs, as they say, to be somewhat unveiled and said, this is how things work. It's information that people would like to know. Just a simple thing about how much water do we get from the city and how much do we get from regional wells, and that's why I gave you that number, because that seems to be a number that's interesting to people. But Councillor Gallo talked about trends. We see the trend that people are using less water. So as the cost goes up, less water is being used, and that's a good thing, but it's being used less because people aren't watering their lawns as much as they used to, and so that trend seems to be going down on a per capita basis, and that's a good thing. But one message I want to get loud and clear, and certainly Stephanie and I are working on it, is we have a very safe and reliable water system. The residents can be rest assured that when they turn the tap on, they're going to get, as we call it, Aurora's finest coming out of the tap. It is a very safe water system, and so we want to make sure that infrastructure is maintained properly.
Councillor Garner?
Thank you. And as a follow-up, council did send a letter down to the province about many things, but one of the things that they were talking about was downloading drinking water quality to municipalities, which would be a cost and safety issue. In your spare time, could you find out where we are with that? Because what you're saying is true. The residents can be assured of safe water. But this is because of the changes post-Walkerton, which it went under provincial, umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an important issue. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Gilliland?
I just wanted to kind of end with a comment. I know we're kind of talking about trying to aim to that 11.3%, which I think is great, and I really hope that we move the needle forward towards that. But I don't want to lose sight of the fact that I think that if we do have that surplus, that we really need to invest in that reserve, especially if we're planning on asking for an increased budget for the 250 storm. Just liability and everything that's included, not to lose sight that there is a need for that. It's my only comment.
Thank you. Mr. Downey, I just have two things. One, I think that's what you mentioned is part of the issue when it comes to communication with the residents. You said costs are going up, usage is going down, and I think that's the struggle that residents are having. Is they're saying, I'm not using as much water, but yet I'm paying more, and so they're struggling with why that is, and so I think that's what we need to communicate properly and clearly to the residents of why that's occurring. So that's the one. The second is as far as the non-billable water and speaking specifically to fire suppression, could we possibly see with the new fire station coming online and the thoughts that there will be training there happening, that we could see the amount of non-billable water coming out of fire suppression go up due to the fact that they will be using more and more water because the training will be occurring at a facility in Aurora?
That's a good question. I haven't talked to the chief about that, so I will.
Okay.
I'll talk with the chief about how we might be able to capture some metrics on the water as well.
Okay.
But no, we have not sat down and had a discussion about how much water is going to be used at that training facility.
Okay. So that's maybe something
that
I
was
can
somebody
bring up.
else's issue before, and now
Yeah.
it becomes ours.
I was gonna say maybe I can bring that up tomorrow as well as JCC. We can bring that up, and maybe has there ever been any thought to ask fire services or Central York Fire to pay for the water that they use?
Well, the thing is that
I know.
it's
It's
only
all
one
coming
taxpayer,
from-
right?
yeah.
So whether they pay or whatever, but
Well, we can take
I'm
it
more
out of their budget.
concerned about capturing what they use. You know, I don't think anyone's going to argue with the fire department using water. We just want to know how much.
And I agree, and I think
so
that's
that's where we're really focusing on. But I never really did think about the training facilities. That's something we're going to have to look into.
I think we need to look into that because I think that could get that percentage to spike up a little bit, and so we have an understanding of what it is. And I'm assuming that the training facility would be metered, so we would have an understanding of how much water would be used.
Okay.
I would hope so.
Quite frankly, I don't know.
Okay.
So you've asked a good question, and I haven't had that conversation with the chief, so I will.
I'll bring it up tomorrow as well. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Gallo.
See you tomorrow, aren't you?
Councillor Gallo.
Just two other questions. I think I know because I thought I saw when, let's say, contractors or somebody needs water from a hydrant that legitimately they put a meter on there and they use whatever they use and then we bill them back. Is that common or?
Through it's not that common anymore. We have a bulk water station now at the end of Eric T. Smith, the new subdivision that we built by the fire hall. By the police station headquarters, and so we do a lot of business out of that bulk water station. So what they'll do now is they will go off and buy bulk water and then use it. So we don't get that many requests for actual meters installed on hydrants. Where we recently used them was in the housing complex that had a water main break, and we actually had to feed those houses out of the water main. So we put a meter on there and then fed out from there so that we could at least capture the amount of water they were continuing to use, but at least they continued to use water while the water main was being fixed in their road. So it's not a common thing.
So is it feasible using those types of meters to whenever we do, because I don't know what the process is, whenever we do the flushing of, is it possible to throw a meter on there before we flush to capture?
Through you, I can't tell you whether or not that's an issue or not. I mean, I can ask staff, find out whether that's possible. That would at least help us get some metrics on that. One of the concerns is I don't know whether that creates enough flow volume or whether they're there 3 times longer than they need to be because of that. I don't know. So it's something I can certainly ask. I hear what you're talking about, and be rest assured, it's of interest to me as well. It's been a conversation that certainly the Chief Administrative Officer and I have had about how we get that number better identified. So I will ask that question. It's worth at least exploring.
And the last one, I think, is probably to Mr. Gardner. The total between the 3 stormwater, wastewater, and water, we had a deficit of, this is 14-13, we had a deficit of 746,000. Any comments towards that, as well as where does that money end up coming from? And if it's a reserve, do we know the balance of that reserve?
Mr. Gardner?
Through you, Mr. Chair. In fact, a negative figure here is a good thing. That means the revenues exceeded the expenses. So we actually ran a surplus. And to
Good.
answer your question, sorry, any surpluses that are experienced in water, wastewater, or storm is contributed to those respective reserves to further replenish them.
So do we have a balance on the reserve?
You could find it in your capital binder, but they're all in a positive territory. And we
And these
continue-
revenues aren't captured in the 5-year operating sheets, right? I wouldn't find this in there.
Sorry, can you repeat?
Would I find either the expense or the revenue in the 5-year capital budget sheets?
Not for the water program, no. That the 5-year expenditure sheet you see is purely focused on the tax levy operating budget.
Mm-hmm. Do we have that document? I'm just curious to see a history of how we've been over the past number of years.
We don't, the last time we produced a document of that nature was the last line-by-line review that was done by the FAC. So you'll have the opportunity to see that
Okay.
as part of the FAC.
Okay, great. So I'm happy to see things in brackets when it's regard to this.
Thank you, Councilor Gallo. Can you get someone to move and second the motion that's in front of us on the screen? Councilor Thompson, Councilor Gardner. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Council, we will take our 10-minute health break and then come back. Council? No. Mr. Downey? We're ready to come back. Okay, so council, we're back. We're gonna move to item number 2. So council, before we do get into this, I will just state that if there are any issues or any specific items that any counselor would like to bring forward to discuss at this time in regards to any of the new FTEs, anything that's within the budget decision summary, this is the time for us to do that. This is what we're going to go through it. What I'd like to do is start from the one sheet that's in front of us at the end of this item, attachment number 1. We can go through that list. And then if there are others as far as the FTEs, then I would suggest that you bring that forward for a discussion and for a decision to move forward to the next meeting. So with that being said, I do want to start off, there are a few on this list that I think that we can kind of clean up quickly, that I think that we might be all in agreement. The first one that's on that list is that communications assistant. My discussion, or my thoughts, first of all, is I don't think that we need that position. I don't need anyone helping me with my social media. We can, okay, if you'd like a motion to receive, yes, we can do a motion to receive, and then we can start the comments. So Councillor Thompson, Councillor Gardner, thank you. The communications assistant, like I said, I don't think we need it. I've heard comments around the table that we don't need it, so I think it's a pretty easy one for us to say that let's just remove this position. So if someone wants to put that on the floor, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Gallo, it's to remove the communication and not approve the communications assistant. Are we good with that? Is that what you're, okay. Any comments or questions on that? On removing the communications assistant position? Councillor Gardner.
Wondered if you spoke with Ms. Mackenzie Smith about that?
I've spoken to the CAO about it.
Okay. And the CAO said?
Mr. CAO?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we're comfortable with that recommendation from council.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Okay. The other ones, I'm just going through some that I think that we can do very quickly, and then I'll let the rest of you all. So number 5, 7, actually the numbers are backwards on this thing. 5, 6, and 7, the Aurora Public Library 2018 Core Operating Grant, the Aurora Cultural Center 2018 Core Operating Grant, and the Aurora Historical Society 2018 Core Operating Grant. I think that we, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we can agree to approve those 3 2018 levels. Councillor Humphreys, second. Councillor Kim. So those are for the 2018 core operating grants for those 3 organizations. So we're good on that? Any comments? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Another one that I think that we can get through quickly is the AHS 2019 Core Operating Grant increase and the ACC Core Operating Grant increase. I would suggest, and this is a recommendation from me, but obviously council can make their decision. I've already asked that we do not approve any increase in funding, so I would say that we remove those. from the budget. Do I have someone that wants to put that on the floor? Councillor Humphreys, second. Councillor Kim, any comments or questions on that item? Yes, 9 and 10. Councillor Gallo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My philosophy is, and I think I've said it before, that I look at all services that we provide that is paid for by the taxpayer on an equal basis, whether we do it within these four walls or whether it's done outside of these four walls. A service is being provided to the taxpayers, and I treat everyone equally. We do lessons at the swimming pool. That's a service we provide, and or we, the Historical Society provides a service. That's a service that's paid for by the tax dollars, and for me, we're treating these differently than other service providers, and I just don't agree with that. I think we should look at them no different than we look at our staff that's internal, and there are areas where there's been increases in varying degrees, and I don't see why we single these out.
Fair enough. Councillor Gardner.
I guess following on that, and with respect to the Aurora Historical Society, they have a very valuable collection there in the Godfrey.
We're not speaking to the collection one.
We're not speaking to the collection. We're
No,
speaking
just
to
to
9
number
and
9
10.
and 10. That's
9
it.
and 10.
Yeah.
So I can't speak to the Aurora Historical Society, but with respect to the Aurora Cultural Center, this is a grant that will enable them to hopefully keep their staff that's in place. They are not, I think they're underpaid, but it is becoming an issue. The staff has been very loyal, but I think they need a show of actual money. So I would ask you please to keep that in place.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. And I'll just make mention that it was mentioned through the presentation that they would be able to fund this $30,400 that they're asking an increase through their reserves just for this year, because they understand the thoughts and the vision moving forward as far as creating looking at reevaluating how we provide funding to all organizations and how we continue moving forward within our budget structure. So that's while they did present it to us, it was mentioned during that presentation that they are presenting it because they feel an obligation to present it. But they had a conversation, and my understanding is that the board did have those conversations on their level, and they did approve that if we did not grant them this increase, that they would use the reserves for this year.
Thank you. And just to be clear, the reserves they're talking about are the reserves that they're mandated to have in case for some reason they had to wrap up the function of the Aurora Cultural Center.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're taking a chance. Their reserve is not at the limit it should be anyway. So yes, they desperately need this money, but it's coming out of a very important reserve that I believe we mandate them to have. So we're just taking that reserve down more.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Humphreys.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and I know it's a tough decision, and I think you're right. We have to be equal to all, and for us this year, we made a clear mandate that we take a pause, and it doesn't mean it's not going to happen moving forward or next year, but that we just really keep things as is. So while we, review and evaluate and make sure that we're providing funding for our partners, because they do provide a great service, and I'm very supportive of the HS and Cultural Center. Have done that from day one. Very, very supportive. But we did ask for them to keep sort of flat 2018, and the library is the only outside organization that's still partner with this that complied. So I did meet with the Cultural Center board, and I love their idea, and I think it's really, really exciting. They did say that they would find other ways to fund the project this year if it would not come from the town.
Are you talking about the kaleidoscope? That's not what we're not talking about the kaleidoscope.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We're just talking about the operating grant increase. That's all.
I'm apologizing then.
That's okay.
I have nothing else to add.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thompson.
We have a cultural service agreement with the Cultural Center. We provide them X amount of dollars to provide services, and they do a great job with those dollars. They provide a lot of programs, a lot of different things for the community. But at the end of the day, it was set up so that they would operate arm's length. If you look at the agreement, we give them autonomy to run that place. It clearly states in that when we're not involved in the hiring and firing of positions, and we haven't been, we provide them with X amount of dollars, and they make those decisions. They've made those decisions to hire whoever they've chosen to hire. They've made salary decisions. And so while I'm sympathetic to the fact that they say now that they've made a realization that there are many people underpaid, that's their obligation to right the ship. And so while, it's, understandable where they look to the town to right size it, as we've done to our own, it's their responsibility. And so I'm not in support of it.
Okay. I'll call the vote. Motion. Oh, Councillor Gallo.
With the fear of repeating myself, I'm going to look at the balance of the operating budget with all our service providers, and I'll be making some suggestions. And I'd like to see if the same rationale is brought forward if I suggest not supporting other aspects of the services that we provide to this town. And I would challenge that those will be very difficult decisions. And for me, it's a question of treating everyone equally, all service providers treating everyone equally. And I have no idea why we singled out these two groups in terms of asking them to not move forward with any increases, yet we have not asked our own staff to do the same.
So far, it's just to clear that up. So far, it's three groups because the library is also not getting an increase as well. So
the three groups. We've asked all three. Yeah. And the library, I think, has the resources to be able to accomplish that. Quite a bit of resources to be able to accomplish that. It's not always a percentage that matters, because a small percentage of a really big number is still a lot of money. And a small percentage of a little bit of money is relatively insignificant if we want to compare, let's say, the library with the Historical Society. 2%. If you take a look at their budgets, they're drastically different. So that's a challenge.
Thank you, Councillor Gallo. I'll call the vote. All those in favor of what's on the screen? Does everyone know what they're voting on? That the grant increases for the Aurora Historical Society and the Cultural Center not be approved. So that's number 9 and number 10 on this list. They not be approved. All those in favor? Hands high. 1, 2, 3, 4. Opposed? Let's do that. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Okay, so we'll start from number 2. Sport Aurora. Any thoughts, anyone? Councillor Thompson.
With respect to the events that they are looking for the town to sponsor, I think, as per my earlier comment, we've allocated money into a sponsorship policy. We've put together a framework. I think that if they or any other organization is looking for the town to sponsor a particular event, then I think that's the avenue they should go through. I think that many of those events I've attended in the past over the years. I think they're great events. They're worthy events. But we've talked about the importance of treating everybody fairly, having a framework by which to make sponsorship decisions for all events, be it the Run for South Lake, be it a Sport Aurora event, be it, the Rise and Shine Breakfast. They're all worthy events, and so I think that it's important for us to establish that framework. We've set money aside now to deal with that, and so personally, I'd rather see for those events it be delegated to that process.
Okay. Is there a suggestion to this, or is they just a comment at this point?
It's a comment at this point.
At this point, Councillor Humphreys.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, and yeah, I've been looking at this, and I absolutely appreciate again that I don't know if I'm looking at this correctly, but if we don't, and I agree, we have to be consistent across the board, but does that mean if this does not get approved tonight, that all these things that have been provided for years and years will come to a stop? Does anybody know?
I would say no, because what we're asking, as far as I think for what Councillor Thompson's asking, is that instead of just approving it, because realistically it shouldn't be operating when you look at it.
Right.
They're asking for sponsorship of certain programs and events. Well, then that's what we've created the sponsorship
Program
policy
for, right.
And so that it should go through that avenue instead of coming here and being put on an operating budget.
Yeah, it doesn't look like an operating budget. That's why I was just surprised to see this. So, I'm in agreement with that as well, that I don't believe we move forward, that it goes through a grant operating process, as other organizations will be going through, and we increased that as well. So it's just, again, it treats everyone fairly moving forward.
Councillor Gilliland?
Councillor Humphreys already covered exactly what I was asking. Thank you.
Councillor Kim?
Thank you. I'm in agreement with Councillor Thompson's suggestion, and that is appropriate. However, given the timelines that we have, if we refuse to not continue with what's been we've done in the past, will they have sufficient time to put a presentation for each individual item, to ensure that they're well prepared for all those events? Is there sufficient time if we change the processes this year and deny the budget for this year?
Mr. Sheo, so I guess if we ask them to go through the sponsorship program, do they have enough time to basically fill out the forms and apply for a sponsorship?
To you, Mr. Mayor, I wouldn't want to speak on behalf of the group, but I can say that the sponsorship policy now allows us to be an administrative process, so we should be able to work through them in a timely manner, assuming that they don't need them all on the same day, kind of a thing, which I'm sure they wouldn't, because these are events throughout the course of the year. So I would imagine that staff could process them.
Councillor Kim?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, Council. So what I'm hearing is that, I'm looking through the list. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that I would consider possibly sponsorship. The other 2, sport, tourism, and communications. I've always felt that those fall within the sport plan. I wouldn't be in favor of moving forward with those 2 items as well. So I'm going to leave it in Council's hands here of what you guys want to do. We have to make a decision as far as operating grant. Does anyone want to put something on the floor? Can I make a suggestion? That that the operating grant not be approved at this time, and that Sport Aurora apply for sponsorship through our sponsorship program for the events? Is that, because that's what I'm hearing here at the table. I agree, and I'm just, but I need someone to put a motion on the floor. Is that the motion that we're going to put on the floor? That we not approve the operating grant and Sport Aurora apply for sponsorship through the sponsorship program for the events? Moved by Councillor Gallo. Second? Second? Councillor Kim. Councillor Thompson, do you want to say something? Councillor Gardner, go ahead.
I first of all agree with your comment on the sport plan for sport tourism. I'm not sure about the communications part, but there is, and I'm okay with the others, but not the All Kids Can Play program, because I doubt whether we're going to grant them $9,000 through a sponsorship program that holds.
I mean, through the program, they might not get the whole amount, but they might get a sufficient amount that they need to run the program. I don't know. I'm just, I think that if we're trying to create a fair and equitable system for all user groups, as Councillor Gallo mentioned.
No, I agree with
I think that we're setting up these policies and programs to put them in place so that way it takes it out of the political realm, and it allows for that fair and equitable system.
Then my comment with that is perhaps we can ask our staff to look at this All Kids Can Play program to make sure that we're not letting any kids fall through the loop by not approving this. Is that a fair ask of you, Ms. McDougall?
I was going to ask Ms. McDougall, is there any way by our next budget meeting, if we can get just a little bit more information on the All Kids Can Play program, and just for council's comfort level, and then Councillor Gardner, we can always, and I'll let Ms. McDougall answer in a second, but we can always, remember this is just a committee, so we could always change things. It's not a final motion. So we could, even though whatever we do here today, at the next budget meeting, we could make a new motion and change whatever we've done.
Thank you. And I do remember this was, there was some sensitivity in this program. Okay.
Ms.
Ms.
McDougall,
McDougall,
did
you
want
wanted
add
to
anything?
speak?
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Certainly, I'll follow up with Sport Aurora and find out the criteria, the information backup, and information regarding the All Kids Can Play program, and then a little more detail about their ask, what the funding request was for, if that helps with some clarity.
And do we, as a town, do anything like this? Is it an overlapping program, or is this?
Ms. McDougall?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, we do support a variety of programs from Canadian Tire Jumpstart, as well as another funding subsidy program through the town. So again, through the criteria comparison, I can help share that information with council.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Gilliland. Oh, actually, sorry, Councillor Thompson, did you want to go now? Because you were second, you're okay? Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you. I just want, for clarity, and this might have been what Councillor Kim had already asked, is there, with the new policy we have in place, is there enough time for the process for them to be asking for this funding for this year? If there is stuff that they need to do immediately, whether it be, I don't know what comes up first, but call it women in coaching, maybe they need these funds right away. Is that policy in place for them to be able to come to us and ask?
I think our CAO answered and said.
Okay, sorry.
I mean, if they all came with all of them at the same time, it would take a little bit of time, but individually, and as far as they fall within different dates, that it should be okay.
Okay. That's what I think. It's a good way to be able to, I guess, break it up. And I agree with the sports tourism. Again, I'm not sure about the communication part either, but I guess we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Humphreys.
Just a quick question. So one of them was answered already, but just back to the All Kids Can Play. I thought that Sport Aurora actually used Canadian Tire Jumpstart to sponsor that. Do we know?
Ms. McDougall?
Yeah, they.
Through Mr. Mayor, I'm not certain about how it originated, but it is not currently a Canadian Tire Jumpstart program. It is one totally funded and operated by Sport Aurora.
Oh, it's separate?
It is
Oh,
separate.
Okay, I thought once that it was mentioned that they went through Canadian Tire
So
Jumpstart as well. But
We will get more information at the next
if you
budget
wouldn't
meeting.
mind digging into that, just to make sure, but, no, that's great, thank you, yep, I'm fine, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
I think it's just wording. I don't know if Sport Aurora would call it an operating grant. They certainly were looking for some funding. They certainly were looking for some sponsorship of the events. I just, the way the motion's worded, I don't know if it's completely accurate and from their perspective. I'd certainly say for my own, again, I reiterate that I think that, the events do provide value, and that I do want to support those events. But again, we've instituted a policy. I think it should be worked through that. I will say that as our earlier conversation, we only put $40,000 in that policy, into that budget item. And so just based on wording, I'm not sure if you would call it an operating, but furthermore, I think, the second one would be nice if it was a little bit more supportive, that, Sport Aurora be encouraged to apply for individual grants for the programs, because I do want them. I do want them to know that, I won't speak for everybody, but myself does support those events. I think they're great events, and I personally try and attend them, and so I want to encourage them to do that. I don't want them to see this as a negative, but that, again, we're looking to put a framework around the sponsorship of events and so many different worthwhile organizations.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson, and I agree. I mean, we want to make sure that they understand that we're just trying to follow a process and create that process and make sure that it is followed and it's fair and equitable right across the board. And so I think that all of us sitting here that have been here at least the last 4 years, and I'd say even beyond that, have appreciated everything that they've done, especially with the events. We're very appreciative. We all attend them, and they're great events, and we want to see them continue. But we just want to follow a certain process now, and I agree. So I mean, I think that I'll look to the mover, Councillor Gallo. Are you okay with? And I would suggest removing the operating out of that first clause, so it would be that Sport Aurora grant in the amount of 49.6 not be approved. Would that work to what you're suggesting, Councillor Thompson? Because you're saying it's not operating, so just say grant. If Councillor Gallo's fine with that, I think it's just a simple wording change. We're just saying that the Sport Aurora grant in the amount of 49.6 not be approved instead of operating grant. Yeah, the Sport Aurora requested grant. Is that fine? Are you good with that? So make it a friendly amount. That's fine. We can do that one. And then the second one, that Sport Aurora be encouraged to apply for individual grants for the programs through the sponsorship policy. Are you okay with that as well? Okay. Seconder, are you okay with that? Councillor Humphreys? You're okay with those wording changes? Okay. So if we can make those, and while we're doing that, I'll go to Councillor Gallo.
I pulled out the report, and just to maybe appease people in terms of All Kids Can Play, and I'll read a portion of it. Funding for this program would go towards the outreach campaign that would be executed to the community. It also supports the project management of the distribution of funds to low-income applicants that apply for the program. We require funding for only the administration of the program that is detailed and sensitive and requires expertise when applying grants policies, and so on and so on. So it doesn't appear to be the funds that actually go towards kids. It's actually the administration and programming of that. Just to be clear that I don't know where the actual money that goes towards the kids comes from. Maybe there are other funding model but the $9,000 is more towards the administration of that.
Thank you, Councillor Gallo, and as we said, we'll get some more information as well for our next meeting. Councillor Humphreys, last time.
Actually, no, don't worry, I'm done, sorry.
You're done?
Yep.
All right. Seeing nothing else, I'm going to call the vote. Everyone knows what they're voting on. It's in front of you on the screen. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Sport Hall of Fame. 28,100. I'm going to make a recommendation on this. I believe that, and I've talked to our CEO, I believe that this should be a one-time fund ask. We are reevaluating. We are going through things as we move forward to the next budget. We don't know what's going to happen moving forward. Do we continue it as a continuous operating grant? Maybe, maybe not. But I think this time we can do it as a one-time and do that reevaluation on how we move forward with this. And then at that time, decide whether it becomes a continuous operating grant. You'll move that? Staff will present where, obviously, Mr. Seo, you'll come back with where it's coming from, where it could, what possible reserves or anything it could come from. Okay. Councillor Humphreys moves that. Does anyone want to second that? No? Councillor Gallo? Councillor Humphreys, you can start.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, in this particular case, I find the Sport Hall of Fame, I think because I would think that the next event would be already in motion, and that the selection, if I'm not mistaken, has probably already been done. So I think it's just timing, I'm pretty sure. So I agree with this one time, but we'd have to talk to the Sport Hall of Fame board and ask them, what do we do moving forward? And this isn't, it's something like you said, do we embed it in our year after year, operating budget, or somehow is this provided another way? But in this case, I just feel a little bit differently on this one.
Thank you, Councillor Humphreys. And just to make mention, if everyone's aware, and I'm pretty sure everyone's aware, that we have taken over the curation. The town has taken over the curation. There are some aspects of it that have been changing and evolving, and so that's why I'm suggesting that we look at this as a one-time this year, because it might evolve and change slightly some more for next year. And so let's figure it out and properly have this set within our budget moving forward next year. And we can do some of this discussion at Finance Advisory Committee. So that's kind of where I'm looking at this going. So, Councillor Gardner.
I don't agree with this. When I look at what's been said, it says, through our Sport History Alive and Future Hall of Famers programs, we motivate our youth to be active and involved in sport. I think they're motivating the youth to be competitive. And that's... I believe we should promote youth to be active and celebrate outstanding performance, but I don't think we should necessarily be promoting the competitive aspect of that. So I disagree with granting the money.
Okay. Councillor Gilliland.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around if we're with the sponsorship policy, and I just feel like this is something that we would treat the exact same way. We're putting a pause on other services moving forward, and as much as I love the idea of this, I just want to know, if we did not approve something like this, are we still able to, or is this able to be funded going forward if we were to put a pause on this? Could they come and ask for a grant through that policy, just like anything else? Sponsorship policy.
Mr. CEO.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe what's being proposed is to just move this from permanent allocation or in the operating budget, so something that would just have to be taken out some other time if you didn't want to take it out now, funding it one time. And I believe the intent would be to bring it back before the 2020 budget to establish what the operating need is for the organization, and bring it back at that time if it's appropriate. In the interim, they would still get the $28,100 that they've asked for. And I suppose if I'd have to look at what that would, if there's a component of that that's sponsorship, then I suppose we would be in a gray area if they wanted additional sponsorship funding. But at this point, I don't believe that's their intention. I think their intention is that with 28-1 and with the town taking over the curatorial services, that they're good for the year, but we could confirm that.
Councillor Gilliland?
So is it 100% we've taken this over as of now? Is there a specific date that we've taken?
Curation we've taken over.
Okay.
I can add.
All right.
Mr. CEO, you can add to that?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So this was a friendly agreement between the town and the organization, and it reflects the fact that now the display is in our building. We've provided some of those curatorial services in the past, or we've assisted with their own curatorial services, and it just made sense, frankly, to both organizations that we look after that component. So, if, for example, council decided that they didn't want, through the budget process, if they had decided they didn't want the town to do that service, then I'm pretty sure that the Sport Hall of Fame would have come back and increased their budget allocation to be able to go out and purchase those curatorial services.
Councillor Gilliland?
I didn't have a full understanding of everything that this is covering, this $28,000. Is it specific just to promoting the Sports Hall of Fame, or is this including events? Like, I just don't know exactly everything that this $28,000 is going towards.
Ms. McDougall?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, a couple things as I hear there's a bit of confusion. Last year, 2018, their budget was request and it was approved at $48,100. That included the curatorial management for the hall. This year, through our mutual agreement, the town has assumed the $20,000 to be part of the community services operating budget, my budget, and will be taking over the curatorial support for the hall. So the Hall of Fame have come to council, flatline their budget, but are asking for the remaining dollars to operate their annual activities. And those activities, their highlight is the Sports Hall of Fame dinner, inductee dinner that takes place in the fall, as well through the materials and requirements to create the inductee plaques and generation of the awards, the dinner itself. The tickets do cover most of the cost of the dinner as well as sponsorships, but that certainly is their highlight. They also have a number of education programs where they go into the school system and provide an educational component through some of the schools. And they've also recently hosted a hockey tournament, bringing students out that play at all levels and skill sets, whether you're AAA or whether you're brand new, barely stepped on skates, participated in a hockey tournament recently. Generated a lot of engagement and activity within the school system, and certainly an appreciation for sport. So they do a variety throughout the calendar year, more so than just the one event. And this request would support those initiatives throughout the calendar year. Hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, no, that does explain a lot. That's good. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. Similar to Councillor Gilliland, I guess it would be helpful just to get a little additional breakdown of that information, maybe prior to the next budget meeting, because I do want to stay consistent and separated. If some of these dollars are being used, be it for the induction dinner or other programs that we are helping to sponsor or deliver, then let's put it through the sponsorship policy. If it's part of this money is for the operational or administration of the organization and or programs, that's a different conversation. I do want to, we're starting out on this road saying let's, utilize this sponsorship policy. Let's treat everybody equal. So, it would be helpful to have a little bit of breakdown to understand out of this 28.1, what is needed for the delivery of programs and events, because then you could co-brand it and say Sport Hall of Fame and Town of Aurora, and there's sponsorship. And then as we run it through our communications department, they're able then to quantify the, here's what the town gets for their sponsorship. So if possible, get a little bit more information, that'd be great for next week. But I do want to stay consistent with that sponsorship policy and treat everybody the same to the best of our ability.
Agreed. Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Kim?
Thank you. I think I'm essentially in the same line of view as the others. I was struggling with this for a bit, and how is this different from the other asks? And I think next week, when we have a better line by line clarification as to the allocation of those funds, I think it'll be more clear next week. But I just wanted to say that there is somewhat of a difference with the Aurora Sports Hall of Fame, even if it was for sustainability purposes. Depending on the amount, I'd be okay with that, because as soon as we said okay to the Aurora Sports Hall of Fame being located in the SARC, in a town facility, there is an assumption that we are going to partner with them in some way, shape, or form, other than just letting those artifacts and photos collect web or collect dust or whatever that idiom is, because the Sports Hall of Fame it's a continuous conveyor belt of honoring new inductees, marketing them, and marketing what the Sports Hall of Fame and excellence stands for in the Aurora community. So, I think there is a subtle difference in terms of this ask, and if some of it was for sustainability, I'd be okay with that. But I think, again, to be consistent with the others, I think it would be very helpful next week when we get those line items broke down.
Thank you, Councillor Kim. Councillor Gallo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to be clear, the breakdown, they did give us the breakdown, the full breakdown. It's in the budget report from Thursday, February 21st. And they gave a full breakdown of that $28,100, where it's going, and the income side, and a comparison from 2018. So I don't think there's any need for staff to do anything more than that.
Thank you, Councillor Gallo. Councillor Gilliland, second time.
I just want to know where this breakdown is with the numbers that Councillor Gallo is referring to.
It was in your budget. What was the date, Councillor Gallo? What was the date on that report? Thursday, February 21st. Is that?
Here?
No, Budget Committee meeting Thursday, February 21st.
It says Thursday, February 21st.
Page 9. In our agenda.
Okay, so are we going to separate what these line items that are appropriate for sponsorship versus sustainability? Or what are we deciding here? Based on the conversations around the council, I sense that some individuals want to see that line by line and separate some of this amount to go towards a granting policy versus all at once.
That's what some are suggesting around the table, so I'm leaving it in your hands.
Would you be open to separating this?
I'm open to whatever council wants to do as a majority. Councillor Gallo?
Nothing.
Oh, no. Oh, so I saw your name on the screen. That's
that
why.
was it.
So, council, I mean, I can make a suggestion if you want, and say that on this one, maybe we just leave it for right now, and at the next budget meeting, we can make a decision on this one, so everyone can feel comfortable looking through it, coming back and have a better understanding of whether we want to separate, what we want to separate, how much. Do you want to grant the whole thing one time? Do we want to just approve it as is? We can figure it out for the next one. So I think that might be suitable for everyone to get some more time. Is that what everyone wants to do? So is everyone good with that? So we'll just put this one on hold? We'll put this one on hold? Okay. So we'll move to the next one. This one, we won't make a decision. We'll just put it on hold for the next meeting. Well, I don't think we can't, because it's still a continuous meeting, so we can't really defer it, right? Well, we'll just remove the motion. How's that? Councillor Humphreys, you moved it? Remove it? All right, it's removed. So removed. Okay. So we'll move on. Parks Co-op Student Invasive Species, number 4. Councillor Humphreys, would you like to put something on the floor? You would like to not approve this? You second that, Councillor Gardner? Okay, Councillor Humphreys moved, seconded by Councillor Gardner to not approve the Parks Co-op student invasive species. Comments? Oh, Councillor Gardner.
This is like the tiniest drop in the bucket. I don't know what a student is going to do to try and conquer this huge problem. To me, it's completely wasted money.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Gilliland.
I was going to echo that, although I think any little bit helps, but at the same time, I'm looking at this as a rather expensive project that I don't think is going to do a huge dent. But I was also under the impression that co-op student kind of meant it was a non-paying position if it was co-op through school or something or other. So I was a little taken back by the $10,000 that's being put on the floor here. Surely there's some sort of partnership with the local high schools within, some sort of career-guided avenue that a student may want to participate in helping eliminate some of the invasive species. I don't think we need to be hiring a summer student, if that's what it looks like here, for $10,000.
Mr. Sale.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think the intent was, and I wasn't at that meeting, but I'm gathering that the intent was to hire someone at post-secondary level that's studying this, and so they tend to be co-op type arrangements or summer employment arrangements. So it wasn't expected we would find a volunteer with the specialization.
Councillor Gilliland.
Well, I gotta say that as a starving university student in my family, that's a pretty good salary to pull weeds.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I'm not sure best to direct it to Ms. McDougall or Mr. Downey, but, I'm trying to step back from the rationale for this, and I remember Mr. Bridgeford coming and giving a presentation, both at Council and EAC. We have a corporate environmental action plan. We've had another number of other environmental initiatives, and I have this feeling that Council made a commitment to do something about this issue, and I'm not sure or not, so I just want to direct it to staff to see if there is any directive, or as Council established and said that we wanted to take action with regards to invasive species, either through our environmental action plan or some other policies or documents that we've done.
Mr. Downey.
Through Mr. Mayor, Mr. Bridgeford definitely made the appeal to council. I don't recall council agreeing that you would pick up the program and run with it. I believe that's how it got to the Trails Committee, is through Mr. Bridgeford, and so the attempt to get some commitment from council with regards to addressing this issue. But I don't believe there was a commitment from council.
Thank you. As a follow-up then, can you speak to the benefit of this position then?
Mr. Downey.
To you, Mr. Mayor, this came through the committee, so it wasn't a staff request. It didn't come as a result of a staff report, and it was an item that came up during the committee. It was approved by the committee. That recommendation was brought forward to council. Council approved that. We are obligated then to move forward with that as a council direction. So that's why it's here. With regards to the issue of invasive species, there doesn't seem to be a silver bullet at this point. Mr. Bridgeford, as you recall, came forward and they are attempting to try a number of different methods in order to get Phragmites under control. However, none have been successful at this point. So this was, as they say, an attempt to continue along the program of trying to find something that is going to hopefully control this invasive species.
Councillor Thompson.
Okay, thank you.
And I would say, because I was at the committee, so
I remember that.
Yes, so I will say that this was a committee recommendation, but but I'll reiterate a little bit, I think, and go a little bit, elaborate a little bit more from what Mr. Downey's going on. This is something that we all realize that is going to take the provincial government to get on board and do something. So we need the ministry to get on board, provide funding, proper funding for municipalities to deal with this issue. It's not going to happen by us throwing $10,000 at it. It's not going to solve the issue. And I think we're all aware of that. And so you know, it was a recommendation that came from the committee level. I don't believe it was unanimous, but it did pass. And it found its way, as we know, within recommendations, which we're trying to kind of change that structure, how when recommendations come from committees and sometimes we just approve those minutes and next thing we know we have staff, we've given staff direction without really understanding what the full minutes have stated. So we are trying to change that aspect of it, and I think that's what happened with this one. Councillor Gallo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really have no issue with ideas coming from committees and arriving at our table. I think that's what they're there for. I'm not supportive of this, mainly because there's very little information here, and how could I possibly understand what this person is going to be doing with 2 sentences? There's no way I could support that based on 2 sentences. It may be a very great idea, but I have no idea. So I will not be supporting this.
Thank you. Councillor Kim for the first time.
I mean, I think Councillor Gardner put it really well in terms of this is a drop in the bucket. You know, when Mr. Bridgeford came to council a couple of years ago, you know, he disclosed, you know, how large a problem this is, and in my researching at that time, you know, Ministry of Natural Resources or Forest or whichever ministry was in charge of that, they estimated it would cost hundreds of $millions in our Great Lakes alone to resolve this. So I agree that putting 10,000 just for our municipality and our boundaries, that's quite insufficient. I think what I would like to see is more of a grander strategy on how we're going to tackle it, and put, you know, more amounts of town resources and hopefully some provincial funding as well to tackle this issue. And you know, this, you know, these aren't just, you know, little weeds. These are you know, weeds that can go 10 feet tall, and you know, a lot of our intersections where there's a lot of moisture that's collected at the bottom, all those tall things that you see growing that obscure traffic when you're making right or left turns, or right turns in particular. You know, they prevent you know, regeneration of the forest. So you know, whether, you know, we've talked about other environmental, you know, issues like, you know, the bees, and you know, how we're trying to help them. You know, the tree, you know, how we're, you know, spraying the tree. So I think this is a much bigger problem. And so I think in a nutshell, I would not agree with the funding for the co-op student.
Thank you, Councillor Kim. Councillor Gilliland.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I was going to suggest just the exact same thing you were talking about with the responsibility coming from the province and the Ministry of Environment. Do we know if we've reached out to the ministry about any kind of support with this problem at all, or no? We have not.
This has been an ongoing topic at M&R in regards to municipalities have been showing up to AMO, having delegations to the minister themselves. It's been a topic at the forum during AMO. It's a big thing, especially in the northern municipalities, but right across the province, and so it's on topic. We're just waiting to see what the province is going to do about it.
Thank you.
Councillor Gardner.
I think Councillor Kim put it very well. This needs a lot of money thrown at it, and it's not just the examples that Councillor Kim provided. It's destroying a wildlife habitat. It just takes over everything. So it's a huge issue, and one of these weeds can actually break apart concrete. So this could be a problem in town if, anyway, this is wasted money. So, but I would like to see some sort of a strategy with respect to this. And I don't know how to go about that. Mr. CEO, do you have any?
Mr. CEO?
I mean, even if it's just small areas that we can protect.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, as has been stated, there's a lot of municipalities dealing with this, and frankly, for us to try and do something on our own is probably not that relevant to the larger cause, and I would think that we'd continue to lean on the ministry to provide some leadership to municipalities in terms of best practices and ultimately probably funding, as it could be a huge problem financially.
Councillor Gardner?
And in the meantime, they just prosper and multiply and choke out more wildlife habitat, as if the wildlife isn't under enough stress as it is.
So maybe instead of funding for the people, we should do funding for the wildlife. And I'm just.
Well, maybe we should try and partner with the Arboretum or another organization that's interested in this and see if we can get something going.
So, Councillor Gardner, the Arboretum did do some
They did
extensive work behind Tim Hortons there.
Yes.
They were able to get some good results. But at the end of the day, as our CEO mentioned, that you're not going to solve, like, even if you clear up one area, you're not going to solve it unless it becomes a province-wide cleanup, in essence, because you might clean up one area and it's going to come back over here on the other side. So it's a bigger problem than just doing small things here and there. We need the province to step in and help in a big way.
I think we'll be waiting for a little bit.
Unfortunately.
Thank you.
Okay, motion on the floor. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Next, we have the Aurora Historical Society Collection Storage. I will make a recommendation on this one, Councillor Gardner. I don't know if you're going to take my recommendation, but I would suggest that this one be one time, and the reasoning for that is because the Aurora Historical Society came up and spoke to the fact that they only need it for this year. Next year, moving forward, everything's going to be in place and they should be okay. But we can deal with that. But I think that for this time, maybe it's a one-time. If you're okay with that, if you want to put that forward. Okay, Councillor Gardner, second. Councillor Humphreys. Councillor Gardner, go ahead.
Just as I was saying before, it's a very valuable collection. They do have some stored at Hillary House, well, on display at Hillary House because it's a climate-controlled environment. But it would be a shame if anything happened to the collection. So let's hope between now and next budget they do find a way to help.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Through to Mr. Gardner. Jason, can you confirm, did we not provide one-time grant request funding for it last year?
Yes, we did. Mr. Gardner.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, we did. We funded it out of the Council Contingency Fund in 2018.
Thank you. So I guess, last year was one-time funding. This year is another one-time funding.
Mr. CEO.
Through Mr. Mayor, that request was made last year because they had a grant application in and they expected funding and to be able to move forward with the assembly of a building that was ultimately going to be the home of these documents. That grant application didn't come through. That's why they showed up again this year and asked for a larger grant for the parking lot. And they believe they're in good standing for another grant process to move ahead with the planned building or securing of the permanent storage facility. So at this point, 1 year could make sense, but to the point, there's a decent probability that they'd be back next year if the building isn't in place, asking for another one-time or another grant.
That's it? Anybody else? Okay, call the vote. Oh, Councillor Gardner, second. No?
I know. I just have to say, the Aurora Historical Society has a huge load on their shoulders. The building needs so much money. It's just, they're struggling on all counts. And so I think this is just one thing they don't have to think of anymore for this year. We should do it for them.
Councillor Gallo.
Can someone advise me on where we are with, in terms of, I guess, a cultural services review? Because I share Councillor Gardner's perspective that that particular organization really doesn't get its due, and I'm really interested in reviewing where we spend our money. So where are we with that?
Mr. CL?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, this is a work in progress that is sort of had some fits and starts, but it got off to a slow start. We have done the initial part of review of cultural services in the community and cultural funding by council by getting together the groups that have been funded and continue to be funded by council. There was a report that came to council on that, I believe, just towards the end of last term, that identified that the next steps are to basically dust off the cultural master plan and get back centered on that plan. Seem to have not progressed too much in many aspects of that plan. And I believe most of the cultural partners were in favor of that being the sort of rallying point to figure out how to move forward in the community from a cultural perspective. We do see this coming back to council, though, in the context of the possibility of a new cultural space downtown, and a number of those groups have expressed interest in using that space as well. So it will lead to the same place where we have to come back and figure out how to deal with the allocation of funding to those groups or the allocation of town resources, especially if we're going to build new resources. So I would expect that once a decision is made on Library Square, that we would once again turn our focus back to the cultural sector and finishing that work that's already been started.
Councillor Gallo?
I just think it's extremely valuable for us to go through that to actually see where we spend our resources and the value for every dollar, and that includes all of them, including the library. I just feel many times this organization just doesn't get what they deserve.
Thank you, Councillor Gallo, and I'll just kind of throw in, I'd like to thank Councillor Kim once again for his motion last term in regards to starting this process, in regards to looking at the cultural partners and how we're going to move forward. So I'm looking forward to when we can get to a point that we can start to make some headway on that. So I'm going to call the vote on this one in front of us. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. So next, we have number 11, the ACC Kaleidoscope in Schools. Anyone want to put anything on this, or do we want to hold off on this one and wait for our next meeting so we can look at options, continue to look at options? I will say that I have tried to look at different options that we can look at how this could possibly move forward. So I think that if we gave it some more time for us to come up with some available options, but that's up to council. If you want to put something forward today, that's fine. Councillor Gallo?
I just wanted some input in terms of, it says to be funded through capital. If someone could, clearly some thought was put towards that. If someone could explain the rationale.
Mr. CL?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, one of the ideas put forward by staff is that this is a pilot project, and that you could consider it to be similar to a capital program, a capital project, and fund it for the 2 school years, which would require $50,000 contributions out of the 19 and 2020 budgets. I've gone back to the Cultural Center to make sure I understood how that funding would work because the program year is different than our fiscal year. So their school year is half of two of our fiscal years, and in essence, that if this kind of funding was provided, I've been assured by the Cultural Center that this would allow them to run the program for 2 full school years, which would mean that they would not require any additional funding for this in 2020. They would come back in 2021 with a report on the success of the pilot and could potentially be seeking part funding for the 2021 portion of the school year, but that wouldn't occur till the 2021 budget deliberations.
Councillor Gallo?
If it was funded through capital, how would that work? Where would we, are we increasing the cash to capital or it's not currently?
Mr. CEO? Oh, Mr. Gardner?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I would suggest that you fund it through the rate stabilization reserve. Rate stabilization reserve doesn't receive a cash to capital contribution.
Okay. All right, I'm happy to wait till we have, maybe explore it a little bit more. It's fine.
And that's what I was suggesting, is that let's explore those options and see and present all those options and where the funding could possibly come from, just to make sure that everyone has an understanding instead of kind of throwing some darts at the board right now. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. To your earlier suggestion, are we putting forward other, items for consideration so that we can see the whole picture? And if so,
Yes.
Is that happening at this time?
Yes, I got one.
Because I'd like to put something forward that we've all been sort of talking about, just so that it's on everybody's radar as we're going through this. Earlier, Councillor.
Can we wait till we're done this one and then?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Gilliland.
Same thing.
In regards to?
If we were putting forward different options with this particular line item.
With this particular one?
Yeah.
I'm just suggesting that that we continue to have staff work through possible options
Mm-hmm.
and come back to us at the next meeting with those options with a full scope, so that way we can make a proper decision of whether we want to move forward with it or not.
And within that option is because you did talk through you, Mr. Mayor, to CAO, I guess, about the school fiscal years. Was there a way of separating the two funding 50-50 that as a possibility? Is that one of the options of looking at, or is that something that poses a bit of a difficulty?
No, I think the option is where the funding would come from. Mr. CEO?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the challenge is that they need to make a 2-year commitment to the program, which involves 3 of our fiscal years. So that's why it's been suggested that as long as the allocation was made over the two of our fiscal years, 19 and 20, that they would be able to run 2 complete program rounds of the program, even though it would bridge 3 of our years. So that's why they need the commitment now. If he just gave 50, that doesn't get them through the second half of their second school year. Sorry.
Yeah.
Councillor Gilliland?
No, I agree with what you're saying.
Okay. Councillor Gardner?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe that staff and council and everybody has talked about this extensively. So I don't know. I think that this option you came up with is, as a pilot project, probably solves a lot of the issues. It's just whether council is committed to doing this or not. And I believe the Cultural Center was always envisioned, hopefully, to go out into the community with cultural programming. And this is, although I don't think they were intending to do it. It's in the strat plan. I think that was intended to be in year 3 or 4 of the strat plan. But then the donation came, or the possible donation came to them in the first year of the strat plan. And so they have to make a decision, and they've come to council. I don't know what else we can talk about. I think everybody has met with them. I think Mr. CAO, I think you have. I think we either have the will to do it or we don't. and it's an amazing project, and we get to do it for half the price. So I don't know what, I mean, it wouldn't be approved until we finish the process anyway, but, I mean, I think every counselor has to, the next time we come at this, has to decide whether they want to do it or not. Do we want to take the chance or not? Do we want to, take advantage of the residents' donation or not? It's just a yes or a no.
Councilor Garner, thank you, and I agree to a certain extent. I just think that we also need to make a decision of where it would be funded as well, and make sure that it's properly coming out of the area that we all agree that it should come out of.
Well, what are the options?
That's what we don't.
I
That's
know,
what
but
we
why
need to
don't
get.
we?
Well, that's what we need to
Why
get.
don't we have this before us then?
We have one option in front of us, but we're still
No,
working.
but the funding.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
still working through and seeing if there are other viable options for this.
Yeah, and I know you want to do it, or you wouldn't have tried to figure out this pilot idea. So, it's just okay. So we'll put it off to another meeting.
Councilor Gallo?
It is, I tend to agree with what Councilor Gardner is saying. Is staff working on other options in terms of funding sources? Because that's ultimately, as you say, Mr. Mayor, the last thing is where is it going to be funded from? And if we all agree, then it moves forward. If they are, then that's fine. Happy to wait. If we're going to get what we have here, then I'm not sure how much farther we're gonna be at the next meeting.
Mr. CEO?
Through Mr. Mayor, so staff had no formal direction when this came. It sort of was presented and then just sort of left. We weren't sent with any specific direction. I know having talked to a couple of councillors after that meeting, I know there was some confusion about how the funds flowed and how the years worked, and so I took it upon myself to get that clarified between the chair and the executive director. And so I did have a number of conversations, but I didn't really have any authority to put an option on the agenda, not knowing where council was even going with the option. It was sort of just presented and not a lot said about it in terms of advancing a decision. So we really waited to see what you did with it kind of at this level before writing up a full slate of options. But it's basically a function of whether you want to support it at all, B, whether you want to put it into the operating budget, because their actual request was to put it into the operating budget, $50,000 a year going forward, and that they would stop asking for it if the program stopped. That was actually what the request was. So, and then the other version is to do something like the pilot, where a commitment would be made to allow them to move forward with two school years, and then we would bring back a source for that funding, which may or may not be impacted by where you go with the final position on the budget as well. If you want to put it into operating, for example, then we wouldn't have to find a one-time source.
Councilor Gallo?
So I guess what I'm hearing is unless we give some kind of direction, we're going to get the same as what we have in front of us, unless I misunderstood.
Well, I would think that if we around the table right now just agree to have staff look at all possible viable options and come back to us with those options at the next meeting, I think that's direction enough, Mr. CEO, or do you need more than that?
Okay, so I'm happy to put a motion forward that we support the $50,000 for 2021, $50,000 for 21-22, subject to staff coming back and reporting on funding options.
Can I make I was going to make a suggestion that non-tax levy options.
Well, whatever options there are, and then we can decide.
Councilor Gallo, second. Councilor Humphreys. Yeah. Do we have that? Councillor Gallo?
Thousand 21-22, and then subject to staff coming back with options.
Can we split that up instead of 100,000? Thank you. Mr. CEO, go ahead while we're waiting
Just
for that.
if I can suggest a friendly amendment, even though I don't make amendments, rather than reference the school years, really the essence is where council's going to take the money from out of their fiscal budgets. So understanding that it supports two different school years, I think what you're trying to say is that an allocation from 19 budget and 20 budget.
I was just reading exactly what was in the.
Oh, from the capital, from that comment?
Yeah, from that little comment
Okay.
there.
Yeah,
But
so I'd
there's
recommend
a
that we
better
make the,
way of doing it, that's fine.
yeah, I just don't want to confuse the school years with the fiscal years. So their first school year is actually 1920.
So 1920 and then
And then
2020,
2021.
2021.
Are there two school years?
So
But
it
they
might
need
be-
the commitment before 21 to commit to that year.
Councillor, it might be easier just to have it as a full 100,000.
Okay. If we're committing the full 100,000, I guess.
Yeah, because I think there is a difference between the school year, the fiscal
fine.
year, and
That's
it
not
starts to get,
complicated. That's
yeah, it
fine.
starts getting confusing. So I think just better off just leave it at 100,000.
And they're good with that. They're fine.
Is everyone, Councillor Thompson?
Thank you. Since staff are coming back reporting about the funding options for that, can we expand on that? Since the report that we gave, it says that the cost of the program is $150,000 annually. And then staff clarify how that program is going to be funded year over year? Because even in my communication with the executive director, it's still not clear to me how that $150,000 is going to be made up year 2, year 3, year 4 on an ongoing basis. I'd like just to have a little bit of a longer look, because I guess my only concern is depending on how we look to fund this, and if we say, fine, we're going to fund it through capital, then you're looking at a cost pressure, not just for that, but on an ongoing basis when it comes back. And I don't know, 150 out of 400 is what, 0.333, whatever it is, as a tax pressure. So since staff are coming back, I just want to get a clear sense of how the program will be funded over the next few years.
Mr. CEO?
To Mr. Mayor, we'll certainly include some of that information, but I can make it really simple, having gone through this exact conversation with them. The donor is offering to put up $75,000 per school year, provided that money is matched by new funding. The board has committed to raising $25,000 a year to provide that portion, and they've asked the town to come up with the 50. So that would give them the 75 to match the 75, and give them 150 for each year.
Councillor Thompson?
So what I heard was that 75 was a one-time funding just for year one as a seed to get the program. Now, if this particular donor is providing 75,000 each and every year for the next 5 years, that's fantastic. But I'd like confirmation of that.
Mr. CEO?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my understanding is that there have been some conversations, and recognizing the complexity of getting the municipality to commit, the donor is willing to commit to 2 years as well as part of the pilot. So that basically everything would be fine for 2 years, assuming that the board raised its 25 in each of those 2 years. And after that, it would be all open again to report back on how it went, and they're hopeful that the donor would continue to support it, and they're also, I would imagine, hopeful that to some extent the town would continue to support it after the pilot has been reported on.
That's great.
Okay.
And maybe
Councillor
even the
Thompson,
school
can I-
board would be
I'm just
willing
gonna-
to support it a little bit as well.
That's great. I need a motion to extend. Moved by Councillor Kim, seconded by Councillor Thompson. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Councillor Thompson? Councillor Thompson? You still have the floor? We're done? Thank you. Councillor Gilliland?
Thank you. I was going to say the same thing as Councillor Thompson, but the other point I wanted to make was, although we're getting all this funding from the donation and they are asking for this new base, this is all in speculating that the board is not going to be subsidizing this service at all. And I'm having a hard time understanding that here we're going to provide this service. It's going to cost the school boards nothing. They're saving on their busing fees. They're saving on insurance. I know the province is coming down on the boards of education right now, trying to reduce and limit the amount of trips that are off-site to save on insurance and busing. And although I really love this project and I love everything that we're offering, I do foresee, if this is successful 2 years from now, that we should expect some sort of subsidy of this program from the Catholic Board of Education and the York Board of Education. And if that's the case, then clearly we're not going to need to fund as much money moving forward. And I just want to make sure that when we are saying we're going to approve something going forward, if that's kind of like where we're going, that we need to also consider that maybe that new base isn't necessarily all the money that they need, and we shouldn't just rely on the fact that we're going to be giving this service for nothing. Because if I was the Board of Education, I'd be like, yeah, sure, if this is going to cost me $0, I'm on board. But we have to look at as a two-way partnership and what that's going to look like moving forward. Are we going to have some sort of projected kind of language that's going to say, provided there is some sort of partnership and subsidy somewhere down the line, that new base is not necessarily going to be what they're asking for in these next 2 years, because 2 years down the line, they're not going to need that much.
Thank you, Councillor Gilliland. Councillor Gardner. Second time.
I can't remember if the comment was made at the board meeting or here. The problem, I agree with you 100%. The problem with the school boards are that, is this my third time?
No, you're fine.
Oh. The problem with the school boards, because this is just being delivered in Aurora, I don't know if they will ever fund it. And certainly the cultural center can't provide this across the whole board. So, I suppose they could, but I don't think that's their mandate. So.
No debate.
Yeah. So, let's work on it. That's the ideal. But school boards, we all know, and Mr. Downey really knows pretty well too about school boards. Well, it's difficult.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Councillor Gallo, you have spoken twice. If you can make it really, really quick, I'll allow it to slide this time. Are you sure?
I'll just pay attention to the next time other people speak 3 times.
No. Well, they actually.
You get 3 times.
No, it's okay.
No, Councillor Gallo, just to let you know, we have them down just for twice. I didn't write it down, so we'll blame Samantha. Sorry, Samantha. Actually, it's your that's why I said I'll allow you to finish up. Go ahead. I'm allowing you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Doesn't matter. Not to prolong. Just in terms of the school board. For me, and I don't totally agree, and I think we should explore every avenue to subsidize this, even from the school board, and I would put pressure on them. My overarching thing is this is for Aurora kids. To me, as I said last time, I'm taking the venue out of the picture. This is for Aurora kids, not for people outside of our border. So I don't have as big of an issue in terms of the contribution from the board as maybe others. I just see it that way. It's for Aurora kids, and it's just a different venue.
Thank you, Councillor Gallo. How many times did Councillor Gallo answer? You spoke twice. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. I'm going by the sheet. You spoke twice. I'm gonna hold you to it. He got a third time because it was his motion. Sorry. You spoke twice. Councillor Kim. Second time. No, I'm just joking. Go ahead.
I said this a couple weeks ago when the cultural center brought this to us, and I do agree that anything regarding education is not it's not the town's responsibility, and we shouldn't foot a dollar of that into something that is under the purview of the Board of Education. However, my spin on this is that in addition to the fact that it is, as Councillor Gallo mentioned, sorry, it's been a long day. As Councillor Gallo mentioned, it is for Aurora kids, but my primary motivation is that we have Library Square developing, like in any, marketing of a future, a building or facility. You want to promote it as much as possible, and we certainly want to promote traffic in the cultural center, and something like this will certainly do that. So that's my rationale for supporting this, and in addition to the fact that we do have a generous donors that's willing to match. So I wouldn't go beyond the 2 years and the 100,000, but certainly within that time frame, I see this as good dollars from a marketing perspective, promoting what's going to be there. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Kim. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Yep. I'll just remind, all we did was ask for staff to come back with options. Councillor Thompson, we're at the end of the list. You said you wanted to. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I guess a couple things. One, it sort of tweaked my mind when Councillor Gardner was talking about a strategy earlier. So with respect to some of the conversations that have been ongoing about Library Square, I think that some thought needs to be given to putting some money in the budget as a strategy to offset the cost of Library Square. We did it with JCC, and sort of being able to smooth out the tax impact for staffing complements. So I think that's a worthy conversation, whether that starts now or future. Perhaps staff can come back next week and talk about it. I know it's been talked on our sessions that we've had with our CAO and Ms. McDougall. And further to that, to tonight's conversation, so far we have $40,000 in our sponsorship policy. That may not be enough to cover what's been talked about tonight, as well as whatever else staff may have in the works. And so I think just some additional information with regards to that for next week would be helpful.
So, just so I understand the Library Square component, what do you?
Well, I think staff have suggested that the hit was, as a rough ballpark, 600,000 was the operating hit. I'm looking at CAO.
So Mr. CAO?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, of course, these are being refined as
Absolutely.
we go
This is
along,
just-
and we'll have detailed reports for the March 21st special council meeting. We have now extended our work and costed out in detail the operating costs of the plaza, the rink, if that option is chosen by council. So in planning terms, we're around the $705,000 $705,000 operating impact with the rink and everything all in now.
So whether it's a 3-year or a 5-year plan, no different than we did with JCC, where we said each year we would allocate 1.3% to deal with fire. I still think that as a strategy we should be looked at and discuss whether we want to start that process now to kind of smooth out the tax pressure, or whether you wait until the final number is arrived at. It just needs to be on the board for discussion, and I think everybody should have some time to reflect upon it.
Okay, so are we putting in an actual motion, or is that enough?
I just think some motion, some information to come back for the next budget meeting. Right? I mean,
as-
whether it's 3 or 5 years, I'll leave that to the staff to determine what strategy they think would work best. But I think it's a conversation that needs to happen. It needs to happen now. It's budget time.
So you want to put something on the floor? Clear direction?
The staff report back at the next budget meeting with regards to a strategy to, I guess, mitigate the impact, the operational impact of Library Square. Does that have a sound? Yep. There you go.
Second? Councillor Kim? Councillor Gallo?
Would that include, when you say mitigate, would that include any revenue streams, particularly in terms of the design of the building, not necessarily any revenue from the theater or I spoke at length in terms of expanding food services, let's call it. To me, I mean, I'm very much in favor of this in terms of mitigating the cost on an ongoing basis and finding out every single revenue stream that we could possibly squeeze out of that building. If that's what you're saying, you have my complete support.
Councillor Thompson?
I don't know if every revenue stream is being explored. All I'm going off is the conversation that I recently had with staff, where they said that the net impact would be X, and rather than waiting for one particular year to budget for that, I'm saying let's start putting money aside now to plan for it. Hopefully, the net impact is less than that as they explore more revenue options and find ways to further reduce it. But my understanding was that was the net impact of it. And so that would equate to, 705,000. It'd be a 1.6% tax pressure, 1.7% tax pressure in the given year that we started it. And so no different than we did with fire and continue to do with fire. We know that, the swings are significant. And so you start pre-planning and adopt a strategy to raise it by a set amount each year in order to pay for it when it actually comes online. And so all I'm saying is let's start the conversation. If we think today that the net impact is 705,000, but yet through this process, as we go through Library Square, we find additional revenue sources, and I'm fully supportive of your thoughts with regards to food services and so forth, and that can further reduce the impact to the residents, great. But I just think that we need to give some thought now to how we're going to pay for things, and rather than wait for one particular year, you develop that strategy.
Councillor Gallo?
And I completely agree, provided it's kind of a placeholder, because I won't be in support of any of this unless we explore every revenue stream we could possibly get out of this. And that has to happen before, because the design of the place could be impacted by that. So, it has to be in connection with the design of it as well. I'm not interested in another community building that we haven't explored every possible avenue to generate revenue.
Thank you, Councillor Gallo. Do you have that one from Councillor Thompson? Councillor Thompson, can you repeat that? Your motion? Oh, there. I'll get it for you.
Looks like Samantha has it.
Samantha, you have it? Okay, thank you. Okay, is there any other comments while we wait for this to get on the screen? Councillor Gilliland?
Wanted to know if there is a projected timeline estimation when we could get from staff on this motion?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Get the information back, just an estimated time, like,
We would get something presented to us at the next budget
thank you.
meeting, what's the date on that one, Mr. CO?
So if I might, Mr. Mayor, just to actually add to that. So there will be another package for the next meeting, and so anything that's requested here will be in that package. But council will also have the benefit. The next budget meeting is not scheduled until the 18th. As next week is the March break, and we traditionally don't hold meetings for council during the March break. So as a result, council will have their package for the March 21st meeting somewhere around the midpoint of next week. So you'll have all of the detail on the operating plan and the financial plan and so on that is going to be presented on the 21st. So although it's a little out of sync, you'll at least have, in addition to the report that we put on for the budget meeting on the 18th, you will have the background information on the Library Square, the complete agenda for the Library Square meeting on the 21st.
Perfect. So we don't need to add that to have it for the next meeting. We're fine. Okay. Thanks.
Councillor Kim?
Thank you. I'm in agreement with Councillor Thompson's recommendation, as well as Councillor Gallo's. It does make sense that we have, flexible space. The only thing is, the final operating budget will come back next week, and the final detailed design of that building won't be until sometime afterwards. So I don't think Councillor Gallo's conditions will come to fruition. But I trust that, with, staff, we've already met with the CAO and Ms. McDougall regarding our, recommendations and our thoughts on the design. And I think part of that recommendation would be that we do have some flexibility in the space to incorporate some of the food services that Councillor Gallo's recommended, and I'm certainly in agreement with that. So I'm not sure if Councillor Gallo would be okay with approving this and incorporating this into the operating budget next week prior to the final detailed designs. But, I think we're going to have to, trust that the designer will heed by our recommendations. And I think that's all of our wishes, that we do have that flex space, that, if it's a food services space, that there be some of that space allotted.
Thank you, Councillor Kim. Call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Is there anything else before we finish up for this meeting, Council, that you specifically want to get? Councillor Gardner.
Through you, possibly to Mr. Downey. Mr. Downey, hopefully in the future we're going to be doing green infrastructure. Do I need to expand on that?
Mr. Downey?
Yes, I'd appreciate that.
So using trees and just different natural ways to enhance flood or stormwater management. I can see that it's okay. I just wanted to know, Mr. Mayor, thanks. I brought it out. I brought it kind of out of the blue. It's something that we learned at the workshop. Like, if we wanted to use trees and other natural environment to mitigate or to help with flood control, would it be part of the hard infrastructure budget, or do we need to have a separate fund for it?
Mr. CEO?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think the individual projects and that's where those issues would come up. So, for example, the redoing of the ACC parking lot is an example of where the Conservation Authority was heavily involved, and a number of strategies were employed there to deal with groundwater runoff as part of that development. So I think on a case-by-case basis, we would be looking at those things with the Conservation Authority.
And also engineering might suggest them as opposed to traditional methods of pipes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gardner. Council, we still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 FTEs that we could discuss, or we can wait until we can call this meeting, and we can wait till the next meeting to start to get into those and finish up on each of those items. 'Cause I'm thinking that we're going to have some discussions in regards to each of those. So, considering the hour, we've already extended. We're coming up to another extension. I suggest that we look at adjourning today and then deal with those at the next meeting. Is everyone good with that? Okay. So I will ask for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Gilliland, second by Councillor Kim. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. We are adjourned.
Just before anybody falls asleep at the